Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Monkey DFIC. We are thrilled to present today's story. What if Luffy started his journey with Ace and Sabo together? If these stories bring joy to your day, please consider liking and subscribing. Every bit of support helps us continue this passion project. Now, prepare yourself for an amazing tale. Chapter 1. The three captains set sail. The small fishing boat rocked wildly as Luffy launched himself into it, nearly capsizing the vessel before it had even left the shore. "Careful, idiot!" Ace shouted, steadying the boat with one foot while balancing their supplies on his shoulder. "We haven't even left Dawn Island and you're already trying to sink us." Sabo laughed, adjusting his blue top hat as he helped Ace load the remaining provisions. "Did you really expect anything different? He's been talking about this day for 7 years. Luffy grinned wider than should be physically possible, his rubber face stretching with excitement as he bounced around the small craft. "We're finally doing it. Pirates. The three captains. I've been waiting forever." On the shore, the citizens of Fusha village gathered to see them off. Mayor Whoop Slap stood with his arms crossed, his permanent scowl somehow even more pronounced. "You three are making a terrible mistake," he called out. "The world doesn't need more pirate scum." Shishishi. Luffy's distinctive laugh rang out. "We're not just any pirates. We're gonna be the freest people in the world." Makino stepped forward, her gentle smile a stark contrast to the mayor's disapproval. She handed a small package to Sabo. "Some extra food for the journey," she said. "And Luffy's favorite meat buns. They won't last an hour with him around." Ace smirked, jerking his thumb toward Luffy, who was already trying to peek inside the package. Makino's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Take care of each other out there." Sabo nodded, his expression solemn despite his excitement. "Always have, always will." The villagers waved as the three brothers pushed away from the shore, their small boat catching the morning breeze. Luffy stood at the bow, straw hat firmly on his head as he looked toward the horizon. "I'm coming, Shanks. I'm gonna be king of the pirates," he shouted, voice carrying across the water. Ace flicked the back of Luffy's head. "Not if I find the One Piece first." "You guys can fight over the treasure," Sabo said, adjusting the sail. "I've got bigger plans." Ace raised an eyebrow. "Still thinking about taking down the world government? Someone's gotta do it." Sabo's eyes hardened briefly before his smile returned. "But first, we need to build our reputation." The small boat cut through the waves, leaving Dawn Island behind. For 10 years, the three sworn brothers had trained, fought, and dreamed of this day. 3 distinct dreams, 1 shared journey. Luffy leaped onto the mast, balancing precariously as he scanned the horizon. "Which way first?" "East," Sabo said, consulting the crude map they'd stolen years ago from one of Dayton's drawers. "There's an island about 2 days' sail from here. We should stock up on better supplies before heading for the Grand Line." Ace snorted. "We're not ready for the Grand Line yet, dummy. We need a bigger ship and a real crew." "I call dibs on a musician." Luffy shouted. "We need a navigator first," Sabo countered. "And maybe someone who can actually cook something besides roasted alligator." Luffy dropped back down, landing with a thud that made the boat rock dangerously again. "Hey! My cooking's not that bad." "You set fire to water," Ace deadpanned. "That was one time." Their bickering continued as the boat sailed east, the familiar rhythm of their brotherhood unchanged despite the new adventure unfolding before them. By midday, they'd fallen into their roles naturally, Ace keeping watch, Sabo navigating, and Luffy, well, being Luffy. "Fish!" Luffy suddenly shouted, spotting movement beneath the waves. Without hesitation, he stretched his arm far into the water, trying to grab dinner. "Wait, Luffy," Sabo started, but it was too late. "Got something." Luffy grinned as his arm began retracting, only for his expression to shift to panic as whatever he'd caught pulled back. Whoa! The boat lurched violently as Luffy's rubber body stretched across the deck, his hand firmly attached to something massive below the surface. Let go, idiot! Ace yelled, grabbing Luffy's legs. Can't! Luffy shouted back, his arm stretching thinner. My hand stuck in its mouth. Sabo grabbed onto Ace, and the three brothers formed a human chain as the unseen sea creature pulled harder. On three, we all pull. Sabo commanded. 1, 2, 3. They yanked backward with all their might just as the creature surged upward, breaching the surface. Water sprayed everywhere as a sea king, smaller than most but still 10 times the size of their boat, emerged with Luffy's hand wedged between its teeth. That's not a fish. Luffy exclaimed, eyes wide. No shit. Ace released his brother's legs and leapt forward, his fist igniting in flames. Fire fist. The blazing attack struck the Sea King directly in the face. It roared in pain, releasing Luffy's hand and thrashing wildly in the water. The boat spun like a top, nearly throwing them overboard. Sabo steadied himself and raised his metal pipe. My turn. He leapt high, bringing the pipe down with bone-crushing force on the creature's head. The Sea King's eyes rolled back, stunned but not defeated. Gum gum. Luffy wound up his arm, spinning it behind him as it stretched impossibly far. Pistol. His fist rocketed forward, catching the dazed Sea King squarely between the eyes. The impact echoed across the water as the beast finally collapsed, floating unconscious on the surface. The three brothers stood catching their breath, their small boat miraculously still afloat despite the chaos. That, Ace said, flames dying from his fist, was your fault. But now we have dinner. Luffy countered, already drooling. Sabo sighed. We can't possibly eat all of that before it spoils. Watch me. An hour later, they'd carved off as much meat as their boat could safely carry and were back on course, their supplies now including several large chunks of Sea King meat. Not a bad first battle as official pirates, Ace admitted, lying back with his hat covering his face. Though it would have been better if we'd fought actual people instead of Luffy's dinner. We'll get our chance, Sabo said, examining their map again. There's bound to be marines or other pirates in these waters. As if summoned by his words, a distant boom echoed across the ocean. All three brothers sat up straight, looking toward the source of the noise. Cannon fire, Ace said, narrowing his eyes. Sabo pointed to a smudge on the horizon. Ship combat, about a mile out. Luffy was already bouncing with excitement. Let's check it out. They adjusted their course, Ace using his fire abilities to give their small craft an extra boost of speed. As they drew closer, the situation became clear, a merchant vessel under attack by pirates. The attacking ship was painted black with red trim, its Jolly Roger featuring a skull with 3 daggers piercing it from different angles. The merchant vessel was larger but clearly outmatched, its crew desperately trying to fend off the pirates who were swinging across on ropes. What's the plan? Sabo asked as they approached. Luffy stood up, cracking his knuckles. Beat up the bad pirates, save the good guys. How do you know the merchants are the good guys? Ace questioned. The other ship has a Jolly Roger, Luffy pointed out. And they're attacking. Fair point, Sabo conceded. But we need to be smart about this. There's at least 20 pirates on that attacking ship. So about 7 each, Luffy calculated, already stretching his arms. Easy. Before his brothers could stop him, Luffy grabbed the railing of the merchant ship and launched himself across the water. Gum gum rocket. Every damn time, Ace muttered, igniting his legs to propel their boat forward faster. Sabo readied his pipe with a resigned smile. At least he's consistent. Luffy crashed onto the merchant ship's deck, bowling over 3 pirates who'd been cornering a sailor. He bounced to his feet, adjusting his straw hat with a grin. Hey! I'm Monkey D. Luffy, and I'm gonna be king of the pirates, he announced to the startled combatants. But I don't like pirates who attack innocent people. A burly pirate with a scar across his face stepped forward, cutlass raised. What the hell? Another pirate? Not just any pirate, Luffy corrected, stretching his neck to avoid a wild swing. A good pirate. He retaliated with a rapid-fire series of punches, his rubber arms ablur as he took down the scarred pirate and two others who rushed him. Across the deck, the merchant sailors watched in confusion as this stranger with a straw hat fought off their attackers. Meanwhile, Ace leapt from their approaching boat in a burst of flames, landing on the pirate ship's deck. Fire danced around his shoulders as he surveyed the remaining crew members. "Anyone want to explain why you're attacking a merchant vessel in East Blue Waters?" he asked casually, as if inquiring about the weather. "Who the hell are you?" demanded a pirate with a mohawk and twin pistols. Ace's response was a sweeping kick that left a trail of fire in its wake, sending several pirates scrambling to put out their burning clothes. "Just a passing traveler who doesn't like bullies." On the merchant ship, Sabo had joined Luffy, his pipe connecting with pirate skulls with practiced precision. Back to back, the brothers worked through the boarding party. "Behind you, Luffy!" Sabo called, ducking as Luffy's leg swept over his head in a stretching roundhouse kick. "Got him!" Luffy confirmed as another pirate went flying overboard. "How many's that for you?" "5, Sabo answered, parrying a sword strike before countering with his pipe. "6 now. I'm at 8. Luffy boasted. "No way you counted right," Sabo laughed, spinning his pipe to deflect a thrown knife. On the pirate ship, Ace faced the captain, a tall woman with crimson hair and a hook where her left hand should be. Unlike her crew, she seemed unimpressed by Ace's fiery display. "The famous Fire Fist Ace," she noted, drawing a cutlass with her right hand. "I've heard rumors, but I didn't expect to find you in this backwater sea." Ace raised an eyebrow. "Seems my reputation precedes me." "Unfortunately, I can't say the same for you." Captain Crimson of the Three-Blade Pirates, she introduced herself with a mocking bow. Soon to be known as the woman who captured Fire Fist Ace. Ace's fists ignited brighter. "I'd like to see you try." They clashed in the center of the deck, steel meeting fire as the remaining crew members backed away from the intense heat. Captain Crimson was skilled, her blade moving with precision despite Ace's fiery assault. For a moment, they seemed evenly matched. Then Ace grinned. "Sorry, but I can't play any longer. My brothers need me." "Brothers?" Crimson questioned, seconds before Ace unleashed a column of fire that forced her to dive aside. Taking advantage of the distraction, Ace leapt back to the merchant vessel where Luffy and Sabo were finishing off the last of the boarding party. "How's it going, guys?" Ace called as he landed. "All clear here." Luffy replied cheerfully, stretching his arm to grab a pirate trying to escape and yanking him back for a finishing blow. Sabo knocked out the final attacker with a precise strike to the temple. These guys weren't much of a challenge. The merchant sailors cautiously approached their unusual saviors, led by a portly man in a captain's uniform. "We thank you for your assistance," he said hesitantly. "But did you say you're pirates yourselves?" "Yup." Luffy confirmed proudly. "We're the Three Captains Pirates. Just started today." The merchant captain looked bewildered. "Three captains? That's not how pirate crews work." "It is for us," Ace said with a shrug. Before they could explain further, a shout came from the pirate ship. Captain Crimson stood at the railing, her remaining crew gathering behind her. "This isn't over, Fire Fist," she called. "And you've made a dangerous enemy today." Sabo stepped forward. "We've stopped your attack and defeated most of your crew. I suggest you leave before we decide to claim your ship as our prize." Crimson's eyes narrowed, but she knew when she was outmatched. "Cut the grappling lines," she ordered her crew. "We're withdrawing." As the pirate ship began to pull away, Luffy couldn't resist one final taunt. He stretched his face into an impossible expression, sticking his tongue out and pulling his eyelids down. Better luck next time. Was that really necessary? Sabo sighed. Absolutely, Luffy and Ace answered simultaneously. With the immediate threat gone, the merchant sailors gathered around the three brothers, their caution giving way to gratitude. You saved our lives and our cargo, the captain said, bowing deeply. How can we repay you? Luffy's stomach growled loudly. Got any food? An hour later, the brothers sat on the merchant ship's deck, enjoying a feast prepared by the grateful crew. Luffy devoured plate after plate, his rubber stomach expanding to accommodate the massive intake. So you three really are pirates? Asked the first mate, a thin man with a bushy beard. You don't seem like the typical sort. We have our own way of doing things, Sabo explained between bites. We're not interested in terrorizing innocent people or stealing just because we can. We want adventure. Luffy exclaimed, mouth full of meat. And I'm gonna be king of the pirates. The sailors exchanged glances, some amused, others concerned. Where are you headed? The captain inquired. East for now, Ace answered. We need supplies and a better ship before we tackle the Grand Line. The captain stroked his chin thoughtfully. Our next stop is Shell Town. We'll be there by tomorrow morning. You're welcome to stay aboard until then. Shell Town. Sabo perked up. Isn't that a marine base? Indeed. The 153rd branch is stationed there, under Captain Morgan. The merchant's expression darkened slightly. Though from what I've heard, the townspeople aren't too fond of his leadership. Marines, huh? Luffy grinned. Sounds interesting. Ace shot him a warning look. We're not looking to pick fights with Marines on our first day. Not unless they deserve it, Sabo added with a glint in his eye that suggested he knew something the others didn't. That night, the three brothers slept on the merchant vessel's deck under the stars, their small boat tied alongside. Despite Ace's warnings, all three were thinking about what awaited them in Shell Town. Hey, Luffy whispered, arms folded behind his head as he gazed up at the night sky. This is just like we always talked about, right? It's only the beginning, Sabo replied softly. The real adventure starts when we hit the Grand Line. We need a real crew first, Ace reminded them. And a ship that won't sink if Luffy sneezes too hard. I know who I want first, Luffy said. A swordsman. The best one. Sabo chuckled. We'll see who we find. For now, let's just focus on Shell Town and figuring out our next move. And staying out of unnecessary trouble, Ace added pointedly. Where's the fun in that? Luffy and Sabo asked in unison, causing all three to stifle their laughter to avoid waking the ship's crew. As the stars wheeled overhead, the three brothers drifted off to sleep, each dreaming of the adventures that awaited them. Their first day as pirates had already brought battle and victory. Shell Town promised to be even more interesting. The merchant ship docked in Shell Town harbor shortly after sunrise. The three brothers stood at the railing, surveying their first destination as pirates. Shell Town seemed ordinary enough, a modest port with the usual collection of shops, homes, and warehouses. But towering over the settlement was the marine base, its blue and white walls gleaming in the morning sun. Remember, Ace said as they prepared to disembark, low profile. We get supplies, maybe gather some information, and move on. No picking fights with Marines. Unless they deserve it, Luffy and Sabo chorused, earning an exasperated look from Ace. The merchant captain approached, holding out a small pouch that clinked with coins. A token of our appreciation. It's not much, but it should help with your supplies. Thanks, mister. Luffy accepted the reward with his trademark grin. You guys are the best. After saying their goodbyes, the three brothers made their way into town, their arrival drawing curious glances from locals. Three young men, one in a straw hat, one shirtless with an orange hat, and one in formal attire with a top hat, made for an unusual sight. Let's find somewhere to eat, Luffy suggested predictably. Sabo consulted a notice board in the town square. There's a place called Food Foo. Sounds like your kind of establishment, Luffy. As they navigated the streets, they noticed something odd. Whenever they mentioned wanting to find a restaurant, townspeople would flinch or look away nervously. The atmosphere felt tense, with many people hurrying about their business and avoiding eye contact. Something's wrong here, Ace murmured as they approached Food Foo. Everyone's scared. Probably that marine captain, Sabo replied quietly. The merchant mentioned people don't like him. Food Foo was nearly empty despite it being breakfast time. The three brothers took a table by the window, and a nervous waitress approached them. Welcome, she stammered. What can I get you? Meat. Luffy declared. Lots of it. Just bring whatever's hot and plenty of it, Ace translated with an apologetic smile. As the waitress hurried away, the door opened again. A small girl with dark hair entered, carrying a small package wrapped in cloth. Instead of taking a seat, she approached the brothers' table. Are you pirates? She asked bluntly, eyes fixed on Luffy's straw hat. Luffy opened his mouth to respond enthusiastically, but Sabo cut him off. What makes you think that? The girl shrugged. You look different. And strong. She placed the package on their table. If you are, could you give this to Zoro? They're keeping him tied up at the execution grounds. He hasn't eaten in days. Zoro. Ace repeated. Roronoa Zoro. The pirate hunter. He's not a bad person, the girl insisted. He's being punished for protecting me. Before she could explain further, a commotion outside drew their attention. The townspeople scattered as a young man strutted down the street, flanked by marine soldiers. He had a bowl cut and an exaggerated sneer that made him look like a caricature of arrogance. Who's the weirdo? Luffy asked, pressing his face against the window. That's Helmeppo, the girl whispered. Captain Morgan's son. He's the reason Zoro's being held prisoner. Rika, called an older woman from the kitchen. Get away from there. The girl, Rika, quickly pushed the package closer to Luffy. Please help him. He hasn't eaten in 20 days. As she ran back to what was presumably her mother, the three brothers exchanged glances. 20 days without food? Luffy looked horrified at the concept. So much for staying out of marine business, Ace sighed. We should at least check it out, Sabo suggested, tucking the package into his coat. After wolfing down their breakfast, mostly by Luffy, they paid and headed toward the execution grounds at the edge of town. Sure enough, in the center of an open dirt yard, a man was tied to a wooden post under the blazing sun. Roronoa Zoro looked half dead already, his skin burned and cracked, his bandana soaked with sweat, his breathing labored. But despite his condition, his eyes burned with defiance as he glared at the three strangers approaching him. Come to gawk at the demon, he rasped. Get lost. You don't look much like a demon, Luffy observed, stepping closer despite the warning signs posted around the yard. Just hungry. A little girl asked us to bring you this, Sabo said, unwrapping the package to reveal rice balls. Said you protected her. Zoro's fierce expression softened momentarily. Rika. That idiot. She'll get herself killed. What happened? Ace asked, scanning the area for marines. That spoiled brat Helmeppo brought a wolf into town, letting it run wild, Zoro explained, his voice rough from dehydration. It was about to attack Rika, so I killed it. Helmeppo threatened to execute her and her mother unless I survived 1 month tied here. That's messed up, Luffy said, his usually cheerful face hardening with anger. How many days do you have left? Sabo asked. 10, Zoro answered. Now take that food and go. If they see you helping me, the deal's off. Luffy picked up one of the rice balls. You need to eat. I said go. How about a trade? Luffy suggested. I feed you, and you join my pirate crew. Zoro stared at him in disbelief. Are you out of your mind? I'm no pirate. You could be, Luffy insisted. The best swordsman pirate ever. He's always like this, Ace explained with a resigned shrug. Once he gets an idea in his head. I'm not interested, Zoro growled. I have my own goals. Which are? Sabo inquired. To become the world's greatest swordsman, Zoro stated without hesitation. Luffy's grin widened. Perfect. The king of the pirates should have nothing less than the best swordsman on his crew. Before Zoro could argue further, Luffy shoved a rice ball into his mouth. The swordsman choked briefly before giving in and chewing, his body desperate for sustenance despite his pride. Well, well, came a nasal voice from behind them. What do we have here? Civilians helping the prisoner? The three brothers turned to see Helmeppo approaching with his marine escorts. Up close, his bowl cut looked even more ridiculous, matched only by his gaudy purple suit. That would be a violation of our agreement, Roronoa, Helmeppo continued, a smirk twisting his features. Perhaps I should reconsider our deal. We're just talking, Ace said smoothly. No law against that, right? There is when I say there is, Helmeppo retorted. Do you know who my father is? A jerk who raised an even bigger jerk. Luffy suggested. Helmeppo's face turned purple with rage. How dare you? My father is Marine Captain Axehand Morgan, and he'll have you executed for this disrespect. Sabo stepped forward, his diplomatic training from childhood surfacing. Surely there's no need for execution over a simple misunderstanding. We're just passing travelers. Travelers who'll be in a cell by sundown, Helmeppo snapped. Arrest them. The Marines hesitated, exchanging uncomfortable glances. Their reluctance was telling, even Morgan's own men seemed uncertain about his son's commands. Luffy rolled up his sleeve. I've heard enough out of this guy. Luffy, wait, Ace started, but it was too late. Luffy's fist connected with Helmeppo's face, sending him flying backward into the dirt. The Marines gaped in shock as their captain's son lay groaning on the ground, blood trickling from his nose. You hit me. Helmeppo wailed, clutching his face. No one's ever hit me before. My father will kill you for this. I've been wanting to do that since I first saw him, Luffy declared, dusting off his hands. So much for keeping a low profile, Ace muttered. The Marines finally snapped out of their shock and raised their rifles. Stay where you are. You're under arrest. Run, Zoro urged them. Don't throw your lives away for me. Luffy looked him straight in the eye. I never run. And I don't abandon people who don't deserve what's happening to them. Neither do I, Sabo agreed, readying his pipe. Ace sighed, flames flickering to life around his shoulders. Guess we're doing this the hard way. What followed was less of a fight and more of a demonstration. Luffy's rubber limb stretched and snapped, sending Marines flying in all directions. Sabo weaved between rifle barrels, his pipe striking with precision to disarm rather than seriously harm. Ace's controlled bursts of flame created barriers and distractions without burning anyone. Within minutes, the Marines lay scattered and groaning, with only Helmeppo still conscious, cowering behind the execution post. You're all dead, he stammered. My father will destroy this entire town for this. Where are Zoro's swords? Luffy demanded, grabbing Helmeppo by his gaudy collar. In my room. In the base. Helmeppo pointed toward the Marine headquarters. Luffy nodded to his brothers. I'll get the swords. You guys free Zoro. Wait. Zoro called as Luffy prepared to launch himself toward the base. I haven't agreed to join you yet. You will, Luffy replied with absolute confidence. Once you have your swords back and see how awesome we are. With that, he stretched his arms toward the Marine base and rocketed away, leaving Ace and Sabo to deal with Zoro and the fallen Marines. "He's always like that, isn't he?" Zoro asked as Sabo began cutting his ropes. "You have no idea," Ace confirmed. High above them, on the roof of the Marine base, Captain Morgan oversaw a group of Marines struggling to erect a massive stone statue of himself. The captain was a towering man with a steel jaw and an actual axe replacing his right hand. His body was corded with muscle, but it was the cruelty in his eyes that made his subordinates tremble. "Put your backs into it," he barked. "My greatness must be visible from every corner of this town." "Sir." A Marine burst onto the roof, gasping for breath. "There's trouble at the execution grounds. Your son has been attacked, and the prisoner is being freed." Morgan's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Who dares?" "3 young men, sir. They've defeated the guards." Before Morgan could respond, a red blur shot up the side of the building. Luffy landed on the roof, blinking in surprise at the statue. "Whoa, that's ugly," he commented, looking at the Morgan statue. "Is that supposed to be you?" he asked, pointing at the real Morgan. "Who the hell are you?" Morgan roared. "Monkey D. Luffy. I'm gonna be king of the pirates," Luffy announced cheerfully. "I just need to grab some swords first." The Marines stared in disbelief at this strange intruder who had just declared himself a pirate to a Marine captain's face. "A pirate?" Morgan's face contorted with rage. "In my base? Kill him immediately." As the Marines drew their weapons, Luffy spotted a window below that matched Helmeppo's directions. "Sorry, can't play now. Gotta find some swords." He jumped off the roof, leaving Morgan bellowing orders to his men. Crashing through the window, Luffy found himself in what had to be Helmeppo's room. The gaudy decorations and self-portraits were a dead giveaway. In the corner leaned 3 swords, one with a distinctive white hilt. "Found, M." Luffy gathered all 3, unsure which belonged to Zoro. As he turned to leave, he heard heavy footsteps approaching, many of them. Back at the execution grounds, Ace and Sabo had finished freeing Zoro, who stood on unsteady legs after 20 days tied to the post. "Can you fight?" Ace asked, supporting the swordsman. "Give me my swords," Zoro responded, his eyes burning with determination despite his weakened state. "And I'll show you what I can do." "Incoming!" Sabo warned as a contingent of Marines appeared, led by a livid Captain Morgan. "So these are the insects who dare to defy my absolute rule," Morgan growled, his axe hand gleaming in the sunlight. "Where's the 3rd one?" "The one with the straw hat." "Probably still in your base," Ace replied casually, flames dancing around his fists. "Making a mess, knowing him." Morgan's face reddened with fury. "You mock me? I am Marine Captain Axehand Morgan. My word is law in Shell Town." "Funny," Sabo remarked. "The townspeople didn't seem too fond of your law." "Insolence. Marines, execute them all," Morgan ordered. The Marines raised their rifles, but their hesitation was obvious. Many looked conflicted, even frightened, not of the pirates, but of their own captain. "Do it now, or I'll execute you myself," Morgan bellowed. As the Marines reluctantly took aim, a familiar voice called from above. "Hey, Zoro! Catch!" Luffy descended from the sky, 3 swords clutched in his arms. He tossed them toward the swordsman, who caught them despite his weakened state, a feral grin spreading across his face as his hands closed around the familiar hilts. "3 swords?" Ace questioned. "I use Santoryu, 3-sword style," Zoro explained, placing the white-hilted blade in his mouth and drawing the other 2. Despite 20 days of starvation and exposure, the change in his demeanor was immediate. With his swords in hand, he stood taller, his presence suddenly intimidating. Morgan stepped forward, towering over them. "I don't care if you have 3 swords or 300. You will all die here." "I've got this one," Luffy declared, cracking his knuckles. I owe him for what he did to Zoro and this town. Actually, Zoro interjected, stepping forward, I'd like to handle this myself. Consider it my audition for your crew, Captain. Luffy's face split into a wide grin. So you're joining us? If you can get me out of this mess alive, then yes, Zoro confirmed. A man can't achieve his dreams if he's dead, and I can't become the world's greatest swordsman tied to an execution post. Morgan laughed, a harsh, grating sound. A half-dead prisoner thinks he can defeat me? I'll cut you in half. You can try, Zoro replied, placing his white sword in his mouth and drawing the other two. What followed was brief but brutal. Morgan swung his axe hand with tremendous force, enough to split the ground where Zoro had been standing a moment before. But 20 days of starvation hadn't dulled Zoro's speed or skill. He moved like water around the massive captain, his 3 blades flashing in the sunlight. Onigiri. Zoro called, executing a 3-way slash that caught Morgan across the chest. Blood sprayed as the captain staggered backward, disbelief written across his face. Impossible, Morgan gasped. I am the great axe-hand Morgan. I cannot be defeated by some nobody swordsman. You're not great, Zoro stated flatly. You're just a bully with a fancy title. Morgan roared and charged again, axe raised high. This time, Zoro didn't dodge. He met the attack head-on, his 3 swords catching and stopping the axe mid-swing. For a moment, they were locked in a contest of strength, Morgan's massive frame against Zoro's technique. Then Zoro pushed forward, breaking Morgan's stance and sending him stumbling backward. In a flash, Zoro was behind him, swords completing their deadly dance. Tiger. Hunt. Zoro announced as his blades found their mark. Morgan crashed to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. He wasn't dead, Zoro had shown restraint, but he wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. The Marines stared in shock at their fallen captain. Then, to everyone's surprise, they began to cheer. Helmets flew into the air as the soldiers celebrated the downfall of their tyrant. They're happy? Luffy asked, confused. Morgan was terrorizing his own men as much as the townspeople, Sabo observed. No one sorry to see him fall. Zoro sheathed his swords, then promptly collapsed, his body finally giving out after pushing itself beyond its limits. Ace caught him before he hit the ground. Get him somewhere he can rest, Ace told his brothers. And find him some real food before he dies on us. Our first crew member. Luffy exclaimed excitedly. This is awesome. News of Morgan's defeat spread through Shell Town like wildfire. By the time the brothers had gotten Zoro to a local doctor and made sure he was stable, the townspeople were organizing an impromptu celebration. Food appeared from nowhere, tables were set up in the town square, and music filled the air. To our saviors, shouted the mayor, raising a mug. The 3 captains pirates. The crowd cheered, many coming forward to thank the brothers personally. Rika and her mother provided enough food to satisfy even Luffy's appetite, and for a few hours, the 4 unlikely pirates enjoyed the townspeople's gratitude. As evening fell, Zoro, looking somewhat recovered after proper medical attention and several large meals, joined the brothers at their table. So, he said, leaning back with a mug of sake, 3 captains. How exactly does that work? We grew up together, Luffy explained between mouthfuls. We're brothers. Not by blood, but by sake. We each have different dreams, Sabo elaborated. Luffy wants to be king of the pirates, Ace has his own quest, and I have plans to change the world. But we decided to start our journey together. And we each bring different strengths to the crew, Ace added. Luffy's our frontline fighter and the heart of the crew. Sabo's our strategist and negotiator. I handle tactics and, well, fire. Zoro considered this unusual arrangement. And where do I fit in? You're our swordsman. Luffy declared as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. The best one. Not yet, Zoro corrected. But I will be. I made a promise I intend to keep. The celebration continued around them, but a comfortable bubble of companionship had formed around their table. For young men, each with impossible dreams, finding common ground in their ambition and determination. Their moment of peace was interrupted by a Marine officer approaching their table. Unlike Morgan's brutal regime, this man carried himself with quiet dignity. "I'm Lieutenant Ripper," he introduced himself with a respectful nod. "I've assumed temporary command of this base until headquarters sends a replacement for Captain Morgan." "Come to arrest us?" Ace asked, his relaxed posture belying his readiness to fight if necessary. Ripper shook his head. "Quite the opposite. You've done this town a great service." Morgan had twisted everything the Marines stand for: justice, protection, honor. He turned us into his personal thugs. "And now?" Sabo inquired. "Now we'll try to rebuild trust with the townspeople," Ripper replied. "But that puts me in an awkward position regarding you four." "Because we're pirates," Luffy stated matter-of-factly. "Yes," Ripper confirmed. "By your own declaration. I can't in good conscience arrest you after what you've done for Shell Town, but I also can't be seen openly allowing pirates to roam free." "So what are you suggesting?" Zoro asked, hand instinctively moving toward his swords. "Leave by morning," Ripper said simply. "Give me time to file my report without mentioning your involvement." As far as Marine headquarters will know, Morgan was defeated by his own men in a justified mutiny. The three brothers exchanged glances, having one of their silent conversations that came from years of understanding each other. "Sounds fair," Sabo finally answered for the group. "We were planning to move on anyway." Ripper nodded, relieved. "Thank you for understanding. And, for what it's worth, not all Marines are like Morgan. Some of us still believe in true justice." "Maybe," Ace replied noncommittally. "Time will tell." After Ripper left, Zoro looked at his new captains with newfound respect. "You could have fought him. Probably would have won, too. Why agree to leave quietly?" "We're not looking to fight every Marine we meet," Sabo explained. "Some battles aren't worth the cost. Besides," Luffy added with a grin, "we've got bigger adventures waiting for us. The Grand Line isn't going to explore itself." The next morning, the four captains pirates, as Luffy had started calling them, much to Zoro's protests that he was not a captain, prepared to depart. The townspeople had provided them with a slightly larger boat, not quite a proper ship, but sturdy enough to carry 4 people and supplies. As they loaded the last of their provisions, Rika ran up to them, clutching a small package. "This is for you," she said, presenting it to Luffy. "To remember us by." Luffy unwrapped it to find a hand-drawn picture of the 4 of them, surrounded by hearts and stars. In childish handwriting at the bottom were the words, "Thank you, pirate heroes." "Shishishi. This is great!" Luffy exclaimed, carefully tucking the drawing into his vest. "We'll treasure it. Will you come back someday?" Rika asked, her eyes wide and hopeful. Sabo knelt down to her level. "Maybe. The sea is wide, and our journey is just beginning. But we'll remember Shell Town and the brave girl who stood up to a tyrant by feeding a prisoner." Rika beamed, then threw her arms around Sabo in a quick hug before running back to her mother. With the townspeople waving from the dock, the 4 pirates set sail, their course set for the horizon. The morning sun painted the water gold as their boat caught the breeze, carrying them toward their next adventure. "So," Zoro asked, making himself comfortable against the mast, "where to now?" "East," Sabo replied, consulting their map. "There's an island with a small city called Orange Town. Good place to resupply and maybe find some more crew members." "Like who?" Ace inquired, adjusting the sail. Luffy bounced excitedly at the bow. "A cook. Or a musician. Or maybe a—" his words cut off suddenly as his sharp eyes caught something in the water ahead. Without warning, he stretched his arm out, plunging it deep beneath the surface. Not again, Ace groaned, preparing for another Sea King attack. But when Luffy retracted his arm, he was holding a treasure chest. Water streamed from the ornate box as Luffy placed it on the deck, his face split with an excited grin. Look what I found. Treasure. We're real pirates now. How did you even see that underwater? Sabo marveled, examining the chest. It glinted. Luffy explained, as if that clarified everything. The chest was locked, but one strike from Zoro's sword handle broke the mechanism. As they opened the lid, they discovered not gold or jewels, but a strange fruit, purple with swirling patterns and an oddly geometric shape. Is that? Ace began, eyes widening. A devil fruit, Sabo confirmed, carefully lifting the fruit from its velvet cushioning. Just like Luffy's Gum Gum fruit and Ace's Flame Flame fruit. Zoro eyed the fruit suspiciously. Those things that give powers but take away your ability to swim, right? Why would someone lock one in a chest and dump it in the sea? Probably to prevent anyone from eating it, Ace reasoned. Some devil fruits are incredibly dangerous or valuable. I wonder what this one does, Luffy said, poking the fruit with a curious finger. No way to know until someone eats it, Sabo replied, turning the fruit in his hands. Every devil fruit is unique. The four pirates looked at each other, a silent question passing between them. Not me, Zoro stated firmly. I rely on swimming to train. Besides, a swordsman shouldn't need magic powers to be the best. I've already got my rubber powers, Luffy said, stretching his cheek to demonstrate. And I have fire, Ace added, his fingertip igniting briefly. All eyes turned to Sabo, who had never eaten a devil fruit despite growing up alongside two users. I've always valued being able to save these two idiots when they fall overboard, Sabo said with a laugh. But... His expression grew thoughtful as he examined the fruit more closely. Before he could finish his thought, a shadow passed overhead, much too large to be a bird. Looking up, they saw a massive shape descending toward their boat at alarming speed. What the hell is that? Zoro shouted, reaching for his swords. The shape resolved into a person, a man in his 30s with slick back hair and a peculiar metal contraption on each arm. He landed on their boat with enough force to make it rock violently, nearly capsizing them. Well, the stranger said, straightening up to reveal a lean, muscular frame and a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. What do we have here? For brats and the trap fruit that I've been hunting for months. Who are you? Ace demanded, flames already flickering to life around his fists. The name's Riker, the man replied with a casual shrug. Bounty hunter. And you four just saved me a lot of trouble by fishing that fruit out of the sea for me. Bounty hunter? Zoro's eyes narrowed. I've never heard of a bounty hunter named Riker. That's because I specialize in a particular kind of prey, Riker explained, his gaze sweeping over the four of them with calculating precision. Promising rookies with high potential. Catch them early, before their bounties skyrocket. It's more profitable in the long run. And the fruit? Sabo asked, discreetly passing the devil fruit to Luffy behind his back. That's my payment for a specific client, Riker said, extending his hand. Now hand it over, and I might consider letting you four live. Luffy stepped forward, placing himself between his crew and the bounty hunter. No way. We found it, so it's ours now. Riker sighed dramatically. Always the hard way with you young hotheads. Fine, let me demonstrate why they call me Trap Master Riker. He raised his arms, and the metal contraptions began to whir and click. Suddenly, the deck beneath Luffy's feet sprung open, revealing a concealed pitfall that hadn't been there seconds before. Only Luffy's quick reflexes, stretching his arms to grab the mast, saved him from falling through. What the? Ace began, but was cut off as metal wires shot from Riker's wrist devices, wrapping around his arms and torso before he could fully ignite his flames. Devil fruit users are so predictable, Riker commented, pressing a button that sent an electrical current through the wires. Ace convulsed in pain as his flames sputtered and died. Zoro launched himself forward, 3 swords at the ready, but Riker merely smiled. The boards beneath Zoro's feet suddenly shifted, throwing him off balance. Small ports opened in the deck, shooting pellets that exploded into sticky resin upon contact, partially immobilizing the swordsman. "I've studied all of you," Riker revealed, casually deflecting Sabo's pipe with one of his arm devices. Monkey D, Luffy, rubber body, impulsive attacks. Portgas D, Ace, fire Logia, overconfident. Roronoa Zoro, 3-sword style, currently weakened from starvation. And you must be Sabo, the strategist, but no devil fruit powers to speak of. How do you know all that? Sabo demanded, continuing his assault despite the growing realization that Riker was anticipating his every move. Information is part of the hunting process, Riker replied, stepping aside from another swing. And I've been tracking promising pirates in East Blue for years. As they fought, the boat drifted closer to a small, uninhabited island, little more than a rocky outcrop with a few trees. Riker seemed to be maneuvering them deliberately in that direction. "My workshop's just over there," he said, gesturing to the island. "Much better environment for processing my catches. The boat's a bit cramped for my taste." "We're not going anywhere with you," Luffy shouted, launching a gum-gum pistol that Riker somehow dodged despite the speed of the attack. "You don't have much choice," Riker countered, pressing another button on his device. The entire boat shuddered, then began to transform, railings folding into restraints, the mast splitting to reveal hidden machinery. "He's turning the boat itself into a trap," Sabo realized, jumping to avoid a section of deck that tried to clamp around his legs. Within moments, the simple vessel had become a floating prison. Ace remained bound by the electrified wires, Zoro struggled against the hardening resin, and Luffy found his rubber limbs tangled in mechanical coils that emerged from hidden compartments. Only Sabo remained relatively free, desperately dodging the boat's transforming components while searching for a way to help his brothers and Zoro. "Give it up, boy," Riker said, his tone almost bored. "Your friends are caught, and you'll be joining them soon enough. Just hand over the devil fruit, and I'll make your captivity relatively comfortable." "Why are you doing this?" Sabo demanded, buying time as he assessed their dire situation. "We've done nothing to you." "Business is business," Riker replied with a shrug. "And potential is valuable. Fire Fist Ace is worth a small fortune already. The Marine with the right connections could make captain by bringing him in. Roronoa Zoro has made quite a name for himself as a pirate hunter, the Marines would love to recruit him properly. And Straw Hat there, well, let's just say there are parties very interested in anyone carrying the will of D." As Riker spoke, they drifted closer to the rocky island. Sabo's mind raced, formulating and discarding plans as quickly as they came. Then he noticed something. Luffy still had the devil fruit clutched in his hand, partially concealed by his struggling body. A desperate plan formed in Sabo's mind. "Luffy," he shouted. "The fruit. Throw it here." Understanding dawned in Luffy's eyes. With a mighty effort, he freed one arm enough to hurl the purple fruit toward his brother. Sabo caught it one-handed, immediately bringing it to his mouth. "No!" Riker shouted, lunging forward. But it was too late. Sabo bit into the devil fruit, his face contorting at the notoriously awful taste. He forced himself to swallow, gagging at the flavor but determined to consume enough to activate the powers. "You fool!" Riker snarled, his composed demeanor cracking for the first time. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Stopped you from getting it," Sabo replied, wiping his mouth. "That's enough for me." Riker's face darkened with rage. "Then you'll be the first to experience my special accommodations." He raised his arm device, preparing to fire another trap, when suddenly Sabo felt a strange sensation coursing through his body. Energy tingled in his fingertips, his vision sharpened, and instinctively he understood what his new power could do. As Riker fired, Sabo raised his hand. The mechanical trap that shot toward him suddenly froze in mid-air, then reversed direction, flying back toward its creator. Riker barely dodged his own device, his eyes widening in surprise and anger. The trap fruit, he growled. It lets you manipulate any trap or mechanism. Including mine. Sabo grinned, feeling the power flowing through him. With newfound confidence, he extended his hands toward the transformed boat. The vessel shuddered, then began to revert, restraints releasing, hidden compartments closing, the entire structure responding to Sabo's will. No! Riker shouted as his captives were freed one by one. Do you realize how long it took me to build those mechanisms? Should have thought of that before attacking us, Sabo replied, focusing his new powers to dismantle the electrical wires holding Ace. As his brothers and Zoro regained their freedom, Riker's composed facade completely shattered. With a roar of fury, he charged directly at Sabo, both arm devices whirring to life. Look out! Ace called, still recovering from the electrical shock. Sabo stood his ground, concentrating on his new abilities. As Riker reached him, Sabo simply touched one of the bounty hunter's arm devices. It immediately short-circuited, smoke pouring from the joints as Riker howled in pain and frustration. My turn, Luffy announced, winding up his arm. Gum. Pistol. His stretching fist caught Riker squarely in the chest, sending him flying backward. The bounty hunter crashed into the mast, which snapped under the impact. Before Riker could recover, Zoro was there, swords drawn despite the resin still clinging to parts of his body. You mentioned you know about me, the swordsman said coldly. Then you should know what happens next. Wait. Riker held up his hands, his remaining device powering down. I surrender. I know when I'm outmatched. Outmatched? Ace questioned, flames dancing around his recovered form. You had us completely trapped a minute ago. That was before he ate the fruit, Riker said, nodding toward Sabo. The trap fruit is the perfect counter to my fighting style. Every mechanism, every device, every contraption I create is now his to control. So you're giving up just like that? Luffy asked, disappointed by the anticlimactic resolution. I'm a pragmatist, Riker replied with a shrug that couldn't quite hide his seething anger. I know when to cut my losses. Sabo approached the defeated bounty hunter, his new powers allowing him to sense every mechanism and moving part in Riker's remaining arm device. With a simple gesture, he caused it to disassemble itself, falling into harmless pieces on the deck. Tell us what you know about us, Sabo demanded. How did you track us? Who hired you? Riker's jaw tightened, but faced with 4 angry pirates, 2 with devil fruit powers, he relented. I've been following promising rookies in East Blue for years. When I heard about 3 brothers setting sail together, including Fire Fist Ace, I knew you'd be valuable targets. And the fruit? Ace pressed. A commission from a world government official, Riker admitted. They wanted the trap fruit specifically. Paid half up front, half on delivery. Why that fruit in particular? Sabo asked, examining his hands as if seeing them for the first time. Riker hesitated before answering. The ability to manipulate mechanisms and traps might seem limited compared to Logia types, but in the right hands, it's incredibly powerful. Imagine controlling the gates of Impel Down, or the mechanisms of marine battleships, or even the intricate traps that protect the world's greatest treasures. The 4 pirates exchanged glances, beginning to understand the true value of what Sabo had claimed. Well, it's mine now, Sabo stated firmly. And you can tell your government client they'll have to deal with me if they want it. Riker laughed bitterly. They don't take kindly to being denied. But that's your problem now. Their boat had drifted alongside the rocky island. With their vessel damaged from the fight and Riker's transformations, they decided to make landfall for repairs. What do we do with him? Zoro asked, gesturing to Riker. Leave him here, Ace suggested. This island looks uninhabited, but it's small enough that he'll be spotted eventually by a passing ship. After we take anything useful from his workshop, Luffy added with a grin. Riker glared at them but didn't protest, knowing he was in no position to negotiate. As they secured the bounty hunter to a tree with his own restraints, Sabo found himself exploring his new abilities. Every mechanical object seemed to speak to him now. He could sense how they worked, where their weaknesses were, how to control or disable them with a thought. "You okay?" Ace asked, noticing his brother's distraction. "Yeah," Sabo replied, flexing his fingers experimentally. "Just adjusting. It's strange to suddenly have powers after watching you two for so many years." "You'll get used to it," Luffy assured him, stretching his arm to demonstrate. "It becomes part of you eventually. At least now I don't have to worry about saving both of you when you fall overboard," Ace commented dryly. "Zoro can handle Luffy, and I'll take care of myself." "Bold of you to assume I'd save his rubber ass," Zoro muttered, though his tone lacked any real animosity. Exploring Riker's workshop proved fruitful. They found navigation tools, weapons, and even a small but serviceable boat that would serve them better than their damaged vessel. More importantly, they discovered a stack of bounty posters and intelligence reports, including detailed information on each of them. "He wasn't lying about tracking us," Sabo observed, flipping through the papers. "There's stuff here that goes back years." "Look at this," Ace called, holding up a document with world government seals. "Instructions for delivering the trap fruit to a Marine Vice Admiral named Vorens." "Mean anything to anyone?" The others shook their heads. "Well, he's not getting it now," Luffy declared, glancing at Sabo. "It's part of our crew." As the sun began to set, they made camp on the beach, using materials from Riker's workshop to repair what they could of their original boat. The bounty hunter watched them sullenly from his restrained position, occasionally offering unsolicited advice on the repairs that everyone ignored. Around the campfire that night, the four pirates discussed their next move. "Orange Town is still our best bet," Sabo suggested, studying their map by firelight. "We need a proper ship if we're going to make it to the Grand Line." "And more crew members," Luffy added excitedly. "A cook is definitely next on my list." "What about him?" Zoro nodded toward Riker. "We can't just leave him here forever. We'll send a message once we reach the next town," Ace decided. "Anonymous tip about a stranded bounty hunter. Someone will check eventually." As the others continued planning, Sabo walked down to the shore, testing his new abilities on small mechanisms salvaged from Riker's workshop. Each device responded to his will, disassembling and reassembling at his command. The power was subtle compared to Ace's flames or Luffy's rubber body, but he could already see its potential. Ace joined him after a while, sitting beside his brother on the sand. "Having second thoughts about eating it?" "No," Sabo replied honestly. I think this power suits me. The strategist, right? Understanding how things work, finding the mechanisms behind systems, that's always been my approach." Ace nodded. "The trap fruit in the hands of a revolutionary. The world government definitely won't like that." "Good," Sabo said with a grin. "Makes my job more interesting." The brothers sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the moonlight on the waves. "We're really doing it, huh?" Ace finally said. "Setting out to change the world, each in our own way." "Together," Sabo corrected. "At least for now." "Together," Ace agreed, bumping his shoulder against his brother's. The three captains and their swordsmen. The Grand Line won't know what hit it. Back at the campfire, Luffy was regaling Zoro with exaggerated tales of their childhood adventures, complete with dramatic reenactments that had the swordsmen alternating between skepticism and reluctant amusement. As Ace and Sabo rejoined them, Luffy looked up with a grin that shone brighter than the flames. "We should make a toast. To our first adventure and our first new nakama." "And to Sabo's new powers," Ace added, raising a salvaged mug of water. "To the world's greatest swordsman," Sabo contributed, nodding to Zoro. And to the king of the pirates, Zoro concluded with a smirk, raising his own drink toward Luffy. Four mugs clinked together under the stars, sealing a bond that would carry them through the adventures to come. The sea stretched endlessly before them, full of promise and danger in equal measure, but in that moment, everything seemed possible. "First thing tomorrow, we sail for Orange Town," Luffy declared. "And then, the Grand Line. You might want to build up the crew a bit more before tackling the Grand Line," Zoro suggested dryly. Details, Luffy waved dismissively. Adventure waits for no one." As they laughed and planned around the fire, none of them noticed the small den Mushi hidden in Riker's workshop, its eye open and watching, transmitting everything back to whoever was on the other end, someone very interested in the newly formed pirate crew and the power they had just claimed. Chapter 2, Trial by Fire. 3 days after leaving Riker's Island, the three captains' pirates approached Orange Town with their cobbled-together vessel barely staying afloat. Their makeshift repairs hadn't survived the journey as well as they'd hoped. "Land!" Luffy shouted from his perch atop the mast. "Finally! I'm starving." "You're always starving," Ace pointed out, bailing water from the increasingly leaky hull. Sabo studied the approaching shoreline with a frown. "Something's wrong. Look at all that smoke." Plumes of dark smoke rose from several locations within the small port town. As they drew closer, they could make out damaged buildings and empty streets. "Pirates?" Zoro suggested, hand resting on his swords. "Only one way to find out," Luffy declared, stretching his arms toward the nearest dock. "Gum rocket." "Wait, Luffy," Ace began, but his brother had already launched himself toward the town, leaving the other three behind on their sinking boat. "Every single time." Sabo sighed, continuing to navigate toward the harbor. By the time they docked and secured their failing vessel, Luffy was nowhere to be seen. The town itself appeared largely deserted, with signs of recent conflict everywhere, broken windows, bullet holes in walls, and occasional splashes of blood on the cobblestones. "Should we split up to find him?" Zoro suggested. "With your sense of direction?" "No chance," Ace replied. "You'd end up in another town entirely." Zoro scowled but didn't argue the point. They made their way through the empty streets, alert for any signs of danger or their missing captain. Occasionally they passed frightened faces peeking out from behind shuttered windows, but no one ventured out to speak with them. "Over there," Sabo suddenly said, pointing to a large building at the town center. "Looks like the mayor's office. And I think I hear Luffy's voice." Sure enough, as they approached the building, they could hear their brother's distinctive laugh. Pushing open the door, they found Luffy sitting cross-legged on the floor, happily devouring a mountain of food while chatting with a young woman with short orange hair. "There you guys are," Luffy exclaimed around a mouthful of meat. "This is Nami. She's awesome at stealing stuff." The woman, Nami, smiled tightly, clearly uncomfortable with Luffy's blunt introduction. "I prefer the term acquisition specialist." "She's a thief," corrected an older man seated behind a desk, who introduced himself as Mayor Boodle. "But given the circumstances, we're grateful for her help." Over the next hour, they pieced together what had happened to Orange Town. A pirate crew called the Buggy Pirates had taken over the town several days ago, forcing most of the inhabitants to flee. Buggy himself, a blue-haired pirate with a big red nose and the powers of the chop fruit, had established his base in the tavern at the center of town. "I was in the process of stealing his treasure map when your friend crashed into the building next door," Nami explained, shooting Luffy an exasperated look. "I smelled food." Luffy defended himself. "Anyway, this weird clown guy got really mad and started throwing knives at me." "And then what happened?" Ace pressed, knowing his brother too well. "I punched him," Luffy shrugged. "His head came off but kept floating around, which was super weird. Then his crew started shooting those big cannons at the town, and I grabbed Nami and ran. Buggy's destroying the town out of spite, Mayor Boodle said, his hands clenched into fists. This town that we built from nothing after pirates destroyed our previous home. The mayor's passion stirred something in Luffy. He stood up, adjusting his straw hat. Then we'll stop him. Just like that? Nami asked skeptically. You don't even know these people. Luffy looked at her like she was missing something obvious. Bad pirates hurting innocent people. That's enough reason for me. His 3 crew members exchanged knowing glances. When Luffy made up his mind like this, there was no changing it. What's Buggy's deal anyway? Sabo asked Nami. Why set up here in Orange Town? The Grand Line, she replied. He's gathering supplies and information before heading there. The map I was trying to steal shows the entrance route. At the mention of the Grand Line, Luffy's eyes lit up. We're going there too. You should join our crew, Nami. We need a navigator. Not interested in being a pirate, she replied coldly. I hate pirates. No offense. Plenty taken, Ace muttered. Before the conversation could continue, an explosion rocked the building. A cannonball had struck nearby, sending debris raining down on the roof. They're getting closer, Mayor Boodle said grimly. Buggy won't stop until the entire town is rubble. Luffy cracked his knuckles. Time to teach this clown a lesson. The 4 pirates and Nami made their way toward the tavern, following the sound of maniacal laughter and cannon fire. As they approached, they could see Buggy standing on the roof, directing his crew to aim their cannons at different parts of town. Fire! Destroy it all, the clown pirate cackled, his body separating into pieces that floated around him in a grotesque display of his devil fruit powers. Hey, Big Nose! Luffy shouted. The effect was immediate. Buggy's separated head whipped around, his face contorting with rage. Who dares call my beautiful nose big? That guy has issues, Zoro commented. I dare. Luffy continued, stepping forward. We're the 3 captains pirates, and we're here to kick your ass. 3 captains. Buggy's fragmented face reassembled to display his confusion. That's not how pirate crews work, you idiot. That's what I said, Nami muttered from her position behind a nearby building, where she'd taken cover. Buggy floated down from the roof, his body parts reassembling as he landed before them. Up close, his appearance was even more ridiculous, blue hair, a red nose, and garish clown makeup. But the knives that floated between his separated fingers looked deadly serious. You've got guts, Straw Hat, Buggy sneered. But do you know who I am? Captain Buggy. The man who will find One Piece and rule the seas. Luffy's expression darkened. You're wrong. I'm going to be king of the pirates. You. Buggy laughed. Some no-name rookie from East Blue? While they were talking, the rest of Buggy's crew had surrounded them, weapons drawn. Among them stood a man riding a unicycle, wielding a sword, and another with wild white hair shaped like a teddy bear. Kabeji, Moji, Buggy commanded, take care of his friends. The Straw Hat brat is mine. The battle erupted across the town square. Luffy engaged Buggy directly, his rubber punches passing through the clown's separated body. Zoro crossed swords with Kabeji, the unicycle-riding swordsman who used dirty tricks to compensate for his inferior blade work. Ace found himself facing Moji and his pet lion, while Sabo took on several regular crew members. Gum Gum Pistol. Luffy called, his fist shooting toward Buggy only to have the clown separate his head from his body at the last second. Chop Chop Cannon. Buggy countered, sending his detached hand with a dagger flying toward Luffy, who barely twisted away in time. Nearby, Zoro was finding Kabeji frustratingly difficult to pin down. The acrobatic swordsman kept his distance, attacking with fire-breathing tricks and throwing tops when direct sword combat didn't favor him. Fight like a real swordsman. Zoro growled, cutting a thrown top in half. A pirate uses every advantage, Kabeji replied, breathing fire to create a momentary distraction before charging on his unicycle. Ace had the easiest time with his opponents. Moji's lion refused to attack once Ace ignited his fists, and Moji himself proved no match for Fire Fist's combat skills. Within minutes, both tamer and beast lay unconscious. Sabo, testing his new devil fruit powers, discovered he could sense and manipulate the mechanisms in the pirates' weapons. Guns refused to fire, swords stuck in their scabbards, and even the simplest hinged knives failed to open when he concentrated on them. "What the hell?" one pirate exclaimed as his pistol fell apart in his hands. "What kind of witchcraft is this?" "Not witchcraft," Sabo replied, striking the confused pirate with his pipe. "Just a little trap for the unwary." Meanwhile, Nami took advantage of the chaos to sneak into the tavern, intent on finding Buggy's treasure and the Grand Line map. The battle raged across the town square, Buggy's fragmented body parts making him a frustrating opponent for Luffy. Every punch passed through empty air as Buggy separated himself at precisely the right moment. "You can't hit what you can't catch, Straw Hat." Buggy taunted, floating his upper body above Luffy's reach. "Maybe not," Luffy admitted. Then he grinned. "But I can hit that." He pointed to Buggy's feet, which had remained on the ground. Before the clown could react, Luffy stomped hard on his toes. "Yow!" Buggy screamed, his floating parts momentarily faltering in their coordinated movement. Luffy seized the opportunity, launching a gum-gum bazooka directly into Buggy's midsection the instant it descended within range. The impact sent Buggy's parts scattering across the square. "Assemble! Assemble!" Buggy commanded his separated body. But as his parts began flying back together, Nami emerged from the tavern with a bulging sack over her shoulder. "Looking for these?" she called, holding up several of Buggy's toes that she'd managed to snatch during the confusion. "My parts. Give those back, you thief." Buggy screeched, his incomplete body floating awkwardly. "Finish him, Luffy!" Nami shouted. "With pleasure." Luffy wound up his arm, spinning it behind him. "Gum-gum. Rifle." His twisting fist connected with Buggy's reassembling face, sending the clown pirate spiraling into the sky until he disappeared with a distant twinkle. With their captain defeated, the remaining Buggy pirates quickly surrendered or fled. Kabeji tried to escape on his unicycle, but Zoro cut the wheel in half with a decisive stroke, leaving the acrobat face down in the dirt. "That was fun," Luffy declared, dusting off his hands. "Speak for yourself," Zoro grumbled, nursing a cut on his side where Kabeji had managed a lucky strike. The townspeople cautiously emerged from hiding, Mayor Boodle at the forefront. As they realized the Buggy pirates had been defeated, cheers erupted throughout Orange Town. "You've saved our town," Boodle said, tears in his eyes. "How can we ever repay you?" "Food," Luffy immediately requested. "And perhaps a proper ship?" Sabo added more diplomatically. "Ours is barely seaworthy." "Ship?" Nami interjected, an idea forming. "I might be able to help with that." After a celebration feast that depleted most of Orange Town's remaining food supplies, Nami led the crew to a hidden cove a short distance from the town. There, anchored in crystal blue waters, sat a sleek caravel with a sheep's head figurehead. "The Going Merry," Nami introduced. "A gift from some grateful clients of mine." "You stole it," Zoro stated flatly. "I liberated it," Nami corrected with a wink. "From people who definitely didn't deserve it. And I'm willing to loan it to you, temporarily, in exchange for a share of any treasure we find in safe passage to the next few islands. I have business throughout East Blue." "You're joining our crew?" Luffy exclaimed joyfully. "I am not joining your pirate crew," Nami insisted. "This is a temporary partnership of convenience." Ace studied her carefully. "Why help us at all? You said you hate pirates." A shadow crossed Nami's face. "I have my reasons. Let's just say I need to gather a significant amount of money, and traveling with capable fighters makes my job easier. Sabo, ever the diplomat, stepped forward. Whatever your reasons, we'd be grateful for your navigation skills and the use of the ship. Right, Luffy? Right. Luffy agreed enthusiastically. Our new ship is awesome. When can we leave? After we resupply, Ace answered practically. And get a better sense of where we're heading next. Nami produced the map she'd stolen from Buggy. This shows the entrance to the Grand Line through Reverse Mountain. But we're not nearly ready for that journey yet. We should follow the East Blue Coast, build up our resources and crew. Our next destination should be Syrup Village, she continued. It's a small port with excellent food supplies, and... She hesitated before adding, there's someone there who might be useful to us. Is it a cook? Luffy asked hopefully. We definitely need a cook next. No, but he's creative, Nami replied cryptically. Trust me, you'll want to meet him. Over the next 2 days, they stocked the Going Merry with supplies donated by the grateful citizens of Orange Town. Mayor Boodle insisted on providing them with everything they needed, despite Sabo's attempts to pay with some of the treasure they'd collected from Buggy's stash, after Nami had taken her commission. The night before their departure, the crew gathered on Mary's deck, enjoying the cool sea breeze and planning their journey ahead. So we've got a navigator now, temporarily, Ace said, glancing at Nami who was busy charting their course. What other positions do we need to fill? Cook, Luffy insisted immediately. And a musician. Doctor, Sabo suggested more practically. None of us have proper medical training. Sniper, Zoro added. Long-range fighter would balance our crew. Shipwright, Nami called from her maps. This is a fine vessel, but we'll need someone who can maintain and repair it, especially if we're heading to the Grand Line eventually. Luffy lay back on the deck, staring up at the stars. We'll find them all. The perfect crew for the king of the pirates. You mean the perfect crew for 3 captains and a swordsman who's going to be the world's greatest, Ace corrected with a grin. And a navigator who is not officially part of the crew, Nami added without looking up. As darkness settled over the Going Merry, the expanded crew fell into comfortable conversation. Despite her protests, Nami fit in surprisingly well with their dynamic, her pragmatism balancing Luffy's impulsiveness, her focus on treasure amusing Ace, her intelligence engaging Sabo, and her no-nonsense attitude earning Zoro's grudging respect. The journey to Syrup Village proved uneventful, almost suspiciously so, as Sabo remarked. They encountered no marines, no rival pirates, not even unfavorable weather. Nami guided the Merry with expert precision, teaching the brothers the basics of navigation and sailing a larger vessel. Syrup Village appeared on the horizon on their 4th morning, a small, sleepy settlement nestled against rolling hills and protected by steep cliffs. Doesn't look like much, Zoro commented as they approached the shore. The best things often don't, Nami replied mysteriously. Trust me, this detour will be worth it. They anchored the Merry in a small bay and made their way up a sloping path toward the village. As they neared the top of the path, a voice called out from the trees. Halt! Go no further, pirates. This village is protected by me, Captain Usopp, and my 8,000 followers. The crew looked around, seeing no one except a lanky young man with a long nose, wearing overalls and a bandana, standing alone on a tree branch with a slingshot aimed in their direction. 8,000, huh? Sabo remarked skeptically. Where are they hiding? They're all around you. Usopp claimed, his knees visibly shaking despite his brave words. One step more and they'll attack. Luffy tilted his head, studying the strange figure. Then he broke into a wide grin. You're funny. I like you. Funny? Usopp sputtered indignantly. I am the terror of the East Blue. Captain Usopp, whose whose tales of bravery have reached the farthest corners of the world. Wait, Usopp. Ace's attention sharpened. Are you related to Yasopp, by any chance? Usopp nearly fell off his branch in surprise. Why, you know my father? He's part of red-haired Shank's crew, Luffy explained excitedly. He visited my village when I was a kid. He talked about you all the time. The revelation completely changed Usopp's demeanor. He scrambled down from the tree, his slingshot forgotten as he bombarded Luffy with questions about his father. The initial tension dissolved into animated conversation as they made their way into the village. Usopp led them to a small restaurant where, over a hearty meal, Luffy shared stories about Yasopp while Usopp listened with rapt attention. The long-nosed youth's earlier bravado gave way to genuine warmth and enthusiasm that proved infectious. So what brings you to our humble village? Usopp finally asked. We don't get many visitors, let alone pirates. Nami nodded toward him. I told them you might be useful to have around. Me? Usopp pointed to himself in surprise. We need a sniper, Zoro explained between bites. Saw you with that slingshot. You any good with it? Am I good? Usopp puffed out his chest. I can hit a fly off a frog's nose at 100 paces. That's a lie, Nami said flatly. Okay, maybe 50 paces, Usopp amended sheepishly. Still a lie. Fine. But I am the best marksman in the East Blue. I never miss a target I can see. Perfect. Luffy slammed his hands on the table, startling everyone. Join my crew. Our crew, Ace and Sabo corrected simultaneously. Usopp looked taken aback by the sudden invitation. Me? Join a pirate crew? But I have responsibilities here. I have my own crew to look after, and Kaya. Kaya? Sabo inquired. A hint of tenderness crossed Usopp's face. She's a friend. She's been sick for a long time, ever since her parents died. I visit her every day to tell her stories about adventures and far-off places to cheer her up. That's really nice of you, Luffy said, his characteristic perception of people's hearts showing through. Before Usopp could respond, the restaurant door burst open. 3 young boys rushed in, each wielding a small wooden sword and looking panicked. Captain Usopp. Pirates. Real ones, the tallest shouted. They've landed on the North Shore, added another. There's a weird butler with them, the third chimed in. Usopp's expression shifted from confusion to concern. Klahadore? With pirates? That doesn't make sense. Who's Klahadore? Ace asked. Kaya's butler, Usopp explained, already heading for the door. He hates me, but he's obsessively protective of Kaya. He would never associate with pirates. Unless they're not who they appear to be, Sabo suggested, following Usopp with the others close behind. Led by the 3 boys, who introduced themselves as Pepper, Carrot, and Onion, Usopp's self-proclaimed, Usopp pirates, they made their way through the village and into the woods beyond. Eventually, they reached a cliff overlooking the North Shore. Lying flat on their stomachs to remain hidden, they peered down to see a strange ship with a figurehead shaped like a black cat. On the beach stood a thin man with glasses and a butler's uniform, talking to a bizarre-looking pirate in heart-shaped glasses. That's Klahadore, Usopp whispered, pointing to the butler. But I've never seen that other guy before. Captain Kuro, Nami identified the strange pirate. He's infamous, or was. The Marines reported him executed 3 years ago. Looks pretty alive to me, Zoro remarked dryly. They strained to hear the conversation below. The words drifted up in fragments. Tomorrow morning, attack the village, the girl's inheritance, 3 years of planning. They're going to attack the village. Pepper gasped. And they mentioned a girl's inheritance, Sabo added, his eyes narrowing. Kaya's, I presume. Usopp's face had gone pale. Klahadore is planning to have pirates attack the village and kill Kaya for her fortune. He's been her caretaker for 3 years. 3 years of planning, he said, Ace noted grimly. This has been his scheme all along. We have to warn everyone. Usopp declared, already scrambling backward. They won't believe you, Nami pointed out bluntly. You've spent years crying wolf with your pirate stories. The villagers will think it's just another tale. Usopp stopped, the harsh truth of her words sinking in. You're right. They never believe me when it matters. Then we'll have to stop them ourselves, Luffy stated simply, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. Just the 6 of us against an entire pirate crew. Usopp squeaked. 7 counting me. Carrot declared. 8 with me, added Pepper. And 9 with me, Onion stammered. No, Usopp said firmly to his young crew. You 3 will stay in the village and evacuate everyone to the south shore if anything happens. That's an order from your captain. The boys looked ready to protest but ultimately nodded in solemn acceptance of their mission. As the Usopp pirates departed, the remaining 5 began formulating a plan. Usopp, despite his fear, proved surprisingly strategic. There's only one slope gentle enough for them to climb up to the village, he explained, drawing a crude map in the dirt. If we oil it up, they'll slip and slide back down. Then we can pick them off while they're disorganized. Not bad, Sabo admitted, impressed by the quick thinking. Meanwhile, someone needs to protect Kaya directly, Ace added. If Kuro's main goal is her fortune, he'll have a backup plan to reach her even if the crew is delayed. They spent the remainder of the day preparing. Usopp led them to the slope he'd mentioned, where they poured barrel after barrel of oil across the pathway. Zoro and Sabo set up defensive positions with makeshift traps and barricades. Ace and Luffy helped Usopp gather his arsenal of specialized ammunition for his slingshot, everything from smoke bombs to caltrops to his signature explosive, Firebird stars. Nami, meanwhile, snuck into Kaya's mansion to warn her of the danger. The pale, slender girl initially refused to believe her butler would betray her, but Nami's detailed knowledge of Kuro's pirate history and the overheard plot eventually convinced her. Night fell. The 6 defenders took turns keeping watch, tension building as dawn approached. Usopp, despite putting on a brave face, couldn't stop his knees from knocking together. I'm a coward, he admitted to Luffy during their shared watch. Always have been. I tell lies about being brave because I wish I were. Being scared doesn't make you a coward, Luffy replied, uncharacteristically thoughtful. Doing nothing when you're scared, that's being a coward. You're here, even though you're terrified. That's being brave. Usopp stared at him, something shifting in his expression. I never thought of it that way. Besides, Luffy grinned, adjusting his straw hat, you're the son of a great pirate. Bravery's in your blood. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, they spotted the Black Cat pirates' ship approaching the north shore. The battle was about to begin. Except, the attack didn't come from the north. Guys! Nami's voice came through a baby den mushy she'd given each of them. They're at the south shore. They're climbing up already. What? Usopp cried in dismay. But all our preparations are here. They must have known about the north slope being the obvious route, Sabo deduced. We've been outfoxed. No time for regrets, Ace said, already running. We need to intercept them before they reach the village. By the time they reached the south shore, the Black Cat pirates were already halfway up the cliff face, using climbing equipment to scale the seemingly impassable rocks. At their head was not Kuro, but a strange man in a blue coat with cat ears, white gloves shaped like paws, and whiskers drawn on his face. That's Django the hypnotist, Nami informed them, having arrived from her position at Kaya's mansion. Kuro's first mate. Where's Kuro himself? Zoro asked, drawing his swords. Probably making his way to Kaya, Nami replied grimly. I left her hidden in the forest with instructions to run if anyone approaches. Luffy cracked his knuckles. Ace, Sabo, go find Kuro and protect Kaya. Zoro, Nami, Usopp and I will handle these guys. The two brothers nodded, immediately taking off toward the forest while the others faced the approaching pirates. "Look what we have here," Django called, twirling a hypnotic pendulum on a string. "A welcoming committee. How thoughtful. Welcome this." Usopp shouted, launching a firebird star from his slingshot. The explosive projectile caught several climbing pirates directly, sending them plummeting back to the beach below. Those who remained hesitated, suddenly aware that their approach had been discovered. "Don't be cowards," Django commanded. "On the count of 1, 2, Django, you'll all become super strong and fearless. 1, 2. Django." The pirates' expressions changed instantly, their eyes going blank as they let out bestial roars and continued climbing with renewed vigor. "What the hell?" Zoro muttered. "Mass hypnosis," Nami explained. "It's his specialty." The hypnotized pirates reached the top of the cliff, showing no signs of pain or fear as they charged. Zoro met them head-on, his three swords a whirlwind of steel that cut through their ranks. Luffy's rubber limbs stretched and snapped, sending hypnotized pirates flying in all directions. Usopp, despite his fear, proved surprisingly effective. His position at the rear let him target key pirates with specialized ammunition, glue balls to immobilize, pepper shots to blind, explosive stars to create chaos. Nami, wielding her staff with unexpected skill, protected Usopp's flank when any pirates broke through the front line. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Ace and Sabo searched frantically for any sign of Kaya or Kuro. They found the latter first, the butler-disguised pirate captain moving with preternatural speed through the trees, his hands fitted with catclaw gauntlets with blades as long as short swords. "Looking for someone?" Sabo called out, bringing Kuro to a halt. The false butler turned slowly, adjusting his glasses with the palm of his hand to avoid cutting himself on his own claws. "How inconvenient," he said, his voice eerily calm. "More variables in my perfect plan." "Your plan stopped being perfect the moment we learned about it," Ace replied, flames dancing along his shoulders. Kuro's eyes narrowed. "Devil fruit users. How troublesome. But no matter, you're too late to save the girl. My backup plan is already in motion." A scream echoed through the forest, Kaya's voice, filled with terror. "Go," Ace told Sabo. "I'll handle him." Sabo hesitated only briefly before taking off toward the sound. Kuro moved to intercept, but a wall of flames blocked his path. "Your fight is with me," Ace declared, his entire body now wreathed in fire. Kuro's calm facade finally cracked, showing the ruthless pirate beneath. "Do you know who I am, boy? I'm Captain Kuro, the man with 1,000 plans. My bounty was higher than any other pirate in East Blue before I faked my death. And I'm Fire Fist Ace," Ace responded, dropping into a fighting stance. "I don't care about your bounty or your plans. You're threatening innocent people for money, and that's enough reason to burn you to ash." Kuro vanished, his speed so great he seemed to teleport. He reappeared behind Ace, cat claws slicing through the air, only to pass harmlessly through Ace's flame body. "Logia type," Kuro hissed in frustration. "This complicates things." "For you, maybe," Ace replied, countering with a fire fist that Kuro barely dodged. Meanwhile, Sabo raced through the forest, following the sounds of struggle. He found Kaya backed against a tree, facing not a pirate but the sheep-like figure of Mary, her other butler. "Mary?" Sabo called out in confusion. "You're with Kuro too?" The butler turned, revealing glazed eyes and an unnatural grin. 1, 2, Django, he intoned mechanically. "Kill the girl and bring her body to the mansion." "He's hypnotized," Kaya explained, her voice shaking but determined. "Django must have gotten to him earlier." As Mary lunged at Kaya with a knife, Sabo intercepted, his pipe connecting with the butler's wrist and sending the weapon flying. Despite being under hypnosis, Mary was no match for Sabo's fighting skills. Within moments, the butler lay unconscious on the forest floor. "Are you hurt?" Sabo asked Kaya. She shook her head. "No, but we have to help the others. This is all happening because of me, because of my inheritance." "It's happening because Kuro is greedy and cruel," Sabo corrected gently. "None of this is your fault." Back at the cliff, the battle against the Black Cat pirates had escalated. Django himself had joined the fray, his chakram-like pendulum proving to be a deadly throwing weapon that Zoro found himself constantly deflecting from his less battle-hardened companions. "1, 2, Django!" The hypnotist chanted, directing his pendulum toward Luffy. "You'll fall into a deep sleep." Unfortunately for Django, Luffy had been looking elsewhere at the critical moment, the hypnosis failing to affect him. A rubber fist caught the surprised hypnotist square in the face, sending him tumbling back toward the cliff edge. "Is that all you've got?" Luffy taunted. "I thought you guys were supposed to be dangerous." As if summoned by his words, two new figures leapt up from the ship below. The first was a slim man with a bell attached to his chin, the second an overweight man with cat whiskers painted on his face. The Nyaban brothers, Nami identified them. Butchie and Sham, Kuro's trump cards. The brothers proved immediately more dangerous than the regular crew. They moved with feline speed and agility, attacking in perfect coordination that kept even Zoro on the defensive. Their clawed gloves tore through anything they touched, including one of Zoro's sword handles, forcing him to adjust his fighting style. "Usopp!" Zoro called out. "I need a distraction." The long-nosed sniper, who had been providing supporting fire from behind a tree, swallowed hard and stepped into the open. "Hey, cat boys! Over here!" He launched a smoke bomb directly at the brothers, temporarily blinding them. In that moment, Zoro struck. "Onigiri," he called, executing his signature three-sword technique. The smoke cleared to reveal both Nyaban brothers collapsed on the ground, bleeding from diagonal slashes across their chests. "Not bad," Django admitted, rising from where Luffy's punch had sent him. "But this isn't over yet. Captain Kuro will," a scream interrupted him, not from the forest this time, but from the beach below. The remaining Black Cat pirates were pointing out to sea, terror evident in their voices. "Marine ships!" Nami exclaimed, spotting the approaching vessels. "3 of them." "This wasn't part of the plan," Django muttered, his confidence faltering. Captain Kuro didn't account for marine interference. In the forest, Ace and Kuro's battle had reached a stalemate. Kuro's speed made him difficult to hit, but his claws couldn't harm Ace's flame body. The news of marine arrivals changed everything. "It seems our time is up," Kuro said, adjusting his glasses again. "A temporary setback, nothing more." "You're not going anywhere," Ace declared, sending a column of fire toward the pirate captain. But Kuro's speed was truly exceptional. He vanished from sight, reappearing at the forest edge. "Until next time, Fire Fist. Tell the girl she's living on borrowed time." Before Ace could pursue, Kuro was gone, presumably racing back to his ship to escape the approaching marines. The crew regrouped at the south cliff, watching as the Black Cat pirates hurriedly prepared to flee. The marine ships were closing fast, their cannons already firing warning shots. "We should leave too," Nami urged. "If the marines spot us, we'll be in as much trouble as Kuro." "But we didn't finish the fight," Luffy protested. "That cat guy got away." "To fight another day," Sabo acknowledged. "But right now, our priority should be getting safely away from those marine ships." They made their way back to the Going Merry, keeping to the forest paths to avoid being spotted. Kaya and the now awakened Merry, freed from his hypnosis with a good knock on the head, joined them. "You saved our village," Kaya said gratefully. "How can I ever repay you?" "Join my crew," Luffy immediately suggested. "She's not a pirate, Luffy," Zoro pointed out. Kaya smiled. "No, I'm not. But I would like to give you something." She turned to Mary. "The Going Merry is yours now. Consider it my gift for protecting Syrup Village." "But that's your ship." Usopp objected. "And now it belongs to the people who saved my life," Kaya replied firmly. As they prepared to depart, one question remained unresolved: Usopp's place in all this. The long-nosed youth stood on the dock, torn between staying to protect his village and the call of adventure that had always stirred his heart. "Kaya will be in danger as long as Kuro lives," he said, his usual bravado replaced by genuine concern. "I can't leave her unprotected." "The Marines have been alerted now," Sabo reassured him. "They'll have this area under surveillance after learning Kuro is still alive. And Mary seems capable of organizing better security for the mansion. Besides," Luffy added with his characteristic directness, "how can you become a brave warrior of the sea if you stay in this village forever?" Usopp's eyes widened. "How did you know that's my dream?" "Because it's written all over your face," Luffy replied with a grin. "Every time you tell stories about adventures or look out at the ocean. You want to be like your dad, a brave pirate who explores the whole world." Tears welled in Usopp's eyes. He turned to Kaya. "I go," she said softly, taking his hands in hers. "Follow your dream, Usopp. I'll be here when you return with real stories to tell, not made-up ones." The decision made, they set sail with a new ship and a new crewmate. The Usopp pirates, Pepper, Carrot, and Onion, waved tearfully from the shore as their captain embarked on his greatest adventure. "Next stop, Logue Town," Nami announced, consulting her maps. "The last civilized port before the Grand Line." "Logue Town," Ace murmured, his expression unusually somber. "The town of beginnings and endings. Where Gold Roger was born and executed," Sabo added, glancing at his brother with concern. Luffy, oblivious to the sudden tension, punched the air excitedly. "Perfect. I want to see the platform where the king of the pirates died." Their journey to Logue Town passed swiftly, the Going Merry proving to be a far superior vessel to anything they'd sailed before. Usopp quickly carved out a role for himself, not just as sniper but as handyman, his creativity and technical skills coming in handy for various repairs and improvements to the ship. Nami continued to insist she wasn't officially part of the crew, but her protests grew less vehement with each passing day. The treasure they'd acquired from the buggy pirates, what she hadn't already claimed, and a share of Kuro's abandoned loot had put her in an unusually good mood. As they approached Logue Town, the atmosphere on the ship changed. Ace grew increasingly quiet, spending long hours staring out at the sea. The significance of the town wasn't lost on any of them. This was where Gold Roger, the Pirate King, had been executed. For most pirates, it was a place of pilgrimage. For Ace, it was something far more complicated. The harbor of Logue Town came into view on a foggy morning, the outline of the city emerging like a ghost from the mist. The town had prospered as both the gateway to the Grand Line and a major marine base, creating an unusual mix of pirate-friendly establishments and heavy law enforcement. "We should be careful here," Sabo advised as they docked in a less monitored section of the harbor. "This place is crawling with Marines." "We'll split up," Ace suggested, pulling his orange hat lower to shadow his increasingly recognizable face. "Get what we need and meet back at the ship before sundown." They divided into groups. Nami took Usopp to gather navigation equipment and supplies. Zoro headed off alone, muttering something about finding a sword shop to replace his damaged katana, and the three brothers decided to explore the town together, with Luffy insistent on visiting the execution platform. The town was bustling with activity, merchants hawking their wares, sailors fresh from voyages spending their pay, and Marines patrolling in small squads, keeping a watchful eye on it all. The three brothers kept a low profile as they made their way toward the town center where the famous execution platform still stood. "There it is," Sabo said as they entered the main square. "Where the great pirate era began." The platform rose above the square, a simple wooden structure that had witnessed the most significant moment in modern piracy, the execution of Gold Roger and his famous last words that sent thousands of pirates to the seas in search of One Piece. Luffy stared up at it with uncharacteristic reverence. The view the Pirate King had before he died. Before his brothers could stop him, Luffy had stretched his arms up and pulled himself onto the platform. "Luffy!" Ace hissed. "Get down from there. It's restricted." But Luffy stood tall on the platform, gazing out over the town with a broad grin. "I can see everything from here. Hey Ace, Sabo. I can see the ocean." His loud voice drew attention. People stopped to point and stare at the young man standing where only Gold Roger had stood before. Whispers rippled through the growing crowd. "Hey! You there!" A Marine officer's voice cut through the murmurs. "That's a restricted historical landmark. Get down immediately." "This isn't good," Sabo muttered, scanning for escape routes as more Marines began to converge on the square. Ace's tension was palpable, his fists clenched at his sides. "That idiot is going to get us all arrested before we even reach the Grand Line." The situation deteriorated further when a familiar face emerged from the crowd, Buggy the Clown, somehow recovered from his defeat at Orange Town and clearly out for revenge. Well, Buggy cackled, his body parts floating menacingly. "If it isn't Straw Hat Luffy, presenting himself for execution. How convenient." Before anyone could react, Buggy's separated hands flew up to the platform, one holding a cutlass that he pressed against Luffy's neck while the other clamped over his mouth. "Citizens of Logue Town," Buggy announced theatrically. "You are about to witness the execution of the man who dared to humiliate the great Captain Buggy." The crowd gasped, some fleeing the square while others stayed to watch the macabre spectacle. The Marines hesitated, unsure how to handle a hostage situation atop the historic platform. "We have to help him," Sabo said, already moving toward the platform. Ace grabbed his arm. "Wait. Look." Through the parting crowd strode a tall man in a Marine captain's uniform, 2 cigars clenched between his teeth and wisps of smoke curling from his body, clear signs of a devil fruit user. Captain Smoker, a civilian near them, whispered fearfully. "The White Hunter. No pirate has ever escaped Logue Town since he took command." The situation had just got considerably worse. Buggy, oblivious to the new arrival, continued his grandiose speech. "Any last words, Straw Hat?" He removed his hand from Luffy's mouth, expecting pleas or defiance. Instead, Luffy took a deep breath and shouted at the top of his lungs, "I am the man who will become king of the pirates." His declaration echoed across the square, silencing everyone, Marines, civilians, even Buggy himself. It was not just the words but the absolute conviction behind them that struck the onlookers. Captain Smoker stopped in his tracks, his eyes narrowing as he studied the young man on the platform. For a moment, he muttered around his cigars, "He looked just like." His thought was interrupted as Buggy recovered from his shock and raised his cutlass. "Die with that dream, Straw Hat." "Luffy!" Ace and Sabo shouted in unison, rushing toward the platform. What happened next seemed like divine intervention. As Buggy swung his blade down, a massive bolt of lightning struck the execution platform. The wooden structure exploded in a shower of splinters and smoke, sending Buggy flying through the air, charred and unconscious. And there, standing unharmed amid the wreckage, was Luffy, his straw hat still firmly on his head. "Shishishi. That was close," he laughed, seemingly unbothered by his near execution. "Hey, did you guys see that lightning? So cool. This is no time for amazement, you idiot." Sabo shouted, grabbing Luffy's arm. "We need to run. Now." The Marines had recovered from their shock, and Captain Smoker was already moving toward them, his body transforming into billowing smoke. "Portgas D, Ace, Monkey D, Luffy, and Sabo," Smoker called out, his voice cutting through the chaos. "You won't escape Logue Town." "He knows our names," Ace muttered. "That's not good." The three brothers took off through the streets, marines in hot pursuit. Rain began to fall, quickly turning into a downpour that matched the intensity of their flight. "We need to get back to the ship," Sabo shouted over the storm. "What about Zoro and the others?" Luffy called back. As if summoned by his words, they rounded a corner and nearly collided with Zoro, who was running in the opposite direction, 3 swords now at his hip. "Marines everywhere," the swordsman reported. Nami sent up a signal flare. "The ship's ready to sail." Together they changed course, heading for the harbor. The rain grew even heavier, sheets of water reducing visibility to mere feet. Behind them, Smoker's smoke form seemed unaffected by the deluge, closing the distance rapidly. "You three go ahead," Ace said suddenly, stopping and turning to face their pursuer. "I'll hold him off." "Ace," Sabo began to protest. "Go." Ace insisted, flames erupting around his body despite the downpour. "Get to the ship." Reluctantly, Sabo pulled Luffy along, the three continuing toward the harbor while Ace stood his ground. Smoker emerged from the rain, his smoke body solidifying as he faced the young pirate. "Fire Fist Ace," Smoker said, removing his cigars. "Your bounty's been rising steadily. The Marines have been watching you." "I'm flattered," Ace replied, flames intensifying. "But we're leaving Log Town today, with or without your permission." "Fire versus smoke," Smoker observed. "An interesting matchup." Their powers clashed in the rain-soaked street, fire and smoke swirling together in a supernatural combat that defied the elements. Ace's flames, normally dominant in most confrontations, found an equal adversary in Smoker's Logia abilities. Neither could gain a decisive advantage. "You're skilled," Smoker acknowledged, reforming after a particularly intense fire blast. "But inexperienced. You haven't mastered your devil fruit yet." "I know enough," Ace countered, though privately he recognized the truth in Smoker's words. The Marine captain pressed his advantage, his smoke form enveloping Ace from all sides. White launcher. Ace found himself trapped, the smoke solidifying around his limbs despite his fiery defense. For a moment, it seemed Smoker had won. Then a gust of wind tore through the street, not natural wind, but something directed and purposeful. The smoke around Ace dispersed, freeing him from Smoker's grasp. Both combatants turned to see a cloaked figure standing in the rain, face hidden beneath a hood but presence undeniable. "Not your time to catch him, Smoker," a deep voice rumbled from beneath the hood. "You." Smoker's expression shifted from confidence to wary recognition. Ace didn't wait to learn more. Taking advantage of the distraction, he enveloped himself in flames and shot down the street toward the harbor, leaving Smoker and the mysterious figure behind. At the docks, the Going Merry was already pulling away, sails catching the storm winds. Ace launched himself with a burst of fire, landing on the deck as they cleared the harbor entrance. "Cutting it close," Nami remarked, drenched but efficiently directing their departure. "We had help," Ace replied, looking back at the shrinking town. "Someone stopped Smoker, but I don't know who." "No time to worry about that now," Sabo called from the helm. "We need to navigate this storm if we're going to reach Reverse Mountain." The storm that had begun in Log Town intensified as they sailed toward the entrance to the Grand Line. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the massive shadow of Reverse Mountain looming ahead, the only safe way into the most dangerous sea in the world. "Everyone to stations," Nami commanded, her navigation skills proving invaluable in the treacherous conditions. "Usopp, secure those lines. Zoro, man the rudder. Luffy, watch for obstacles." The Going Merry pitched and rolled in the massive waves, fighting against currents that seemed determined to dash them against the rocky coast. Rain lashed horizontally, stinging their faces and making the deck treacherously slippery. "There." Nami pointed through the deluge. "The entrance channel to Reverse Mountain." A narrow gap in the sheer cliffs appeared, where the sea itself seemed to flow upward against gravity. The legendary entrance to the Grand Line was real, a river flowing up the mountain, defying nature through the unique confluence of currents from all four blues. Hard to port. Nami shouted as a massive wave threatened to push them past the entrance. Now. Zoro strained against the rudder, muscles bulging as he fought the sea itself. The Mary responded, turning just enough to catch the upward current. Suddenly, they were no longer fighting the ocean but being carried by it, accelerating rapidly as they began to climb the mountain. We did it! Luffy cheered, holding onto his hat as they raced upward. We're climbing Reverse Mountain. The sensation was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. The Going Merry shot up the narrow canal like a bullet, water spraying on either side as they ascended into the storm clouds. The wind screamed around them, but even it couldn't drown out Luffy's excited whoops or Usopp's terrified wails. Hold tight. Nami warned as they approached the summit. The descent is even faster. They crested the peak for one breathtaking moment, suspended between the four blues and the Grand Line. Time seemed to slow as they glimpsed the vast ocean beyond, the legendary Grand Line stretching to the horizon, wild and untamed. Then they were falling, the Mary nosing downward into the descent channel. Their speed doubled, tripled, the ship vibrating with the force of their passage. The storm cleared suddenly, revealing a brilliant blue sky ahead. We made it! Sabo exclaimed as they shot down the mountain toward the open sea below. The Grand Line. Their celebration was cut short by an earth-shaking sound, a mournful wail that seemed to come from directly ahead. What is that? Usopp asked, clinging to the mast. Sounds like. Ace squinted at the base of the mountain. Something's blocking the exit channel. As they hurtled downward, a massive shape came into view, a black mountain rising from the sea directly in their path. It's a whale. Nami screamed. The biggest whale I've ever seen. We're going to crash. Usopp wailed. Luffy sprang into action, rushing to the bow. Gum Gum Balloon. He inhaled deeply, inflating his rubber body into a massive cushion just as the Mary reached the bottom of the channel and collided with the whale. The impact was jarring but not disastrous. Luffy's improvised buffer absorbed most of the shock, though the ship's figurehead, the ram's head, snapped off in the collision. Eerily, the whale didn't react to the impact. It remained motionless, as if unaware that a ship had just crashed into its side. Is it dead? Zoro asked cautiously. His question was answered by a low rumble that vibrated through the ship. The whale was very much alive, and they had just gained its attention. Nobody move, Ace whispered. Maybe it will ignore us if we, hey. Luffy shouted, jumping onto the whale's massive head. What's the big idea parking in front of the entrance like that? You broke our ship's head. Luffy, no, his crewmates cried in unison. Too late. The whale's gigantic eye, bigger than the Mary itself, swiveled to focus on the tiny human pounding his fists against its skin. For a moment, the standoff held, human and Leviathan regarding each other. Then the whale opened its mouth. The resulting whirlpool pulled the Going Merry inexorably toward the cavernous maw. Luffy, still on the whale's head, reached back desperately toward his ship and crew. Grab on! Sabo called, stretching his arm toward his brother. Their fingers brushed, missed, and then the Mary was swallowed whole, crew and all except for Luffy, into the darkness of the whale's gullet. Inside the whale was, impossible. Instead of digestive acids and organic matter, the Going Merry floated on what appeared to be an artificial sea beneath a painted sky. A small island with a house stood in the middle of this internal ocean, and a waterway system that could only be man-made circled the perimeter. Are we dead? Usopp whispered, staring up at the blue sky, complete with painted clouds. I don't think so, Nami replied, equally stunned. But this doesn't make any sense. A door opened in the side of the house, and an elderly man with flower-shaped hair emerged, holding a newspaper and apparently unbothered by their presence. Visitors, the old man remarked, setting his paper aside. It's been a while since Laboon swallowed a ship with people inside. Laboon? Ace questioned. The whale has a name? Of course he has a name, the old man replied, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I'm Crocus, by the way. The keeper of the Twin Cape Lighthouse and Laboon's doctor. Doctor? You're inside a whale. Usopp exclaimed. Observant, aren't you? Crocus deadpanned. I built this chamber to treat Laboon from the inside. He's been sick for a long time, both physically and heartsick. While Crocus explained Laboon's backstory, a baby whale left behind by a pirate crew who promised to return after circumnavigating the Grand Line but never did, the crew considered their predicament. How do we get out of here? Sabo asked, eyeing the strange waterways. The exit's that way, Crocus pointed casually. Those canals lead to a set of locks I installed. I can flush you back out whenever you're ready. What about our brother? Ace asked. He wasn't swallowed with us. Before Crocus could respond, an explosion rocked the chamber. Two strangers, a man with a crown and a blue-haired woman, emerged from another entrance, carrying what appeared to be weapons. We meet again, old man, the crown-wearing man declared. This time we will defeat you and claim the whale meat. Whale hunters, Crocus growled, his casual demeanor evaporating. I told you to leave Laboon alone. Another explosion shook the chamber, this one coming from above. A section of the sky cracked, and through it fell a familiar figure in a straw hat. Luffy, the crew called out in relief. Luffy landed with a splash in the artificial sea, quickly swimming to the Mary. Guys! You're okay. This whale is super weird. I found a door on top of its head. The situation quickly devolved into chaos. The whale hunters attacked Crocus, who defended himself admirably for his age. Luffy, enraged by their attempt to harm the whale, took them down with a single gum-gum bazooka that sent them flying out through the same hole he'd entered. With the immediate threat handled, Crocus agreed to guide them out of Laboon. As the locks opened and the Going Merry was flushed back into the open sea, Crocus shared more about the Grand Line's unique challenges. Normal compasses don't work here, he explained. You'll need a log post to navigate the magnetic fields between islands. Like this? Nami asked, producing a wrist compass she'd acquired in Logtown. Exactly, Crocus nodded approvingly. You're better prepared than most rookies who make it this far. Once outside, they got their first proper look at Laboon, a truly massive island whale with terrible scars across his head from ramming himself against the Red Line in despair over his missing friends. Luffy, in his uniquely direct way of problem-solving, promptly took the broken mast from the Mary and stabbed it into one of Laboon's existing wounds. Luffy! Nami shrieked in horror. What are you doing? The whale bellowed in pain and rage, thrashing in the water. Luffy stood his ground as Laboon turned to attack him. What followed was a bizarre fight between a rubber man and an island-sized whale that ended, improbably, with mutual respect. It's a draw. Luffy declared, bloodied but grinning. We'll have to settle this when I come back. I'm going to sail around the Grand Line, and when I return, we'll finish our duel. That's a promise. To everyone's amazement, Laboon understood. The whale calmed, watching as Luffy climbed back aboard the Mary. Taking paint from Usopp's supplies, Luffy proceeded to paint a crude version of their pirate flag across Laboon's scars. There, he said proudly. Now you can't ram your head or you'll ruin our mark. This is a sign of our promise. Crocus watched the exchange with misty eyes. That boy, he just gave Laboon something he hasn't had in 50 years, hope. As they prepared to depart, Crocus offered one final piece of advice. The Grand Line is unlike anything you've experienced. Normal rules don't apply here. The weather, the wildlife, even the people, everything is extreme. Most crews don't survive their first week. We're not most crews, Ace replied confidently. No, Crocus agreed, studying them with knowing eyes. You're not. In fact, you remind me of another crew I once knew, many years ago. The Roger Pirates? Sabo guessed, noting how Crocus's gaze lingered on Luffy's straw hat. The old man smiled enigmatically. Safe travels, 3 Captain's Pirates. The Grand Line awaits. With their log pose set to the first island and Laboon's farewell echoing behind them, they sailed into the true beginning of their Grand Line adventure. The weather changed almost immediately, sunshine giving way to snow, then rain, then scorching heat within the span of an hour. Nami said this would happen, Usopp remarked, frantically adjusting the sails as another weather shift hit. The Grand Line's weather is completely unpredictable. Their first real test came on their 3rd day. A thick fog descended without warning, reducing visibility to near zero. They proceeded cautiously, Nami carefully monitoring the log pose to stay on course. Through the fog, a shape emerged, another ship, much larger than the Mary, with battle scars evident even through the mist. Its figurehead was a grinning skull with a mane of silver hair, and its black sails bore no Jolly Roger but rather a simple emblem, a silver key crossed with a cutlass. Pirates, Zoro identified, hand moving to his swords. They haven't spotted us yet, Sabo observed quietly. The fog's concealing us too. Should we try to slip past? Usopp suggested hopefully. Ace studied the other ship with narrowed eyes. Something seems off about that vessel. Look at the deck, no movement, no watchman. A ghost ship? Nami whispered, suddenly nervous. Only one way to find out, Luffy decided, already preparing to launch himself across. Wait, Sabo stopped him. Let's approach carefully. It could be a trap. They maneuvered the Mary alongside the silent vessel, calling out several times but receiving no response. Finally, they boarded cautiously, weapons ready. The deck was deserted but showed signs of recent activity, half-finished meals, abandoned posts, a still-burning lantern. Below deck was the same, empty bunks, personal belongings left behind, but no crew. It's like everyone just vanished, Usopp said, voice quavering. Or was taken, Zoro suggested grimly. In the captain's quarters, Nami discovered a log book and a crudely drawn map. According to this, they were heading for an island called Memoria, she reported. Supposedly rich in treasure, but there's a warning here, something about the collector. Collector of what? Ace wondered. Their investigation was interrupted by a shout from Usopp, who'd been keeping watch on deck. Ship approaching. Coming out of the fog. They rushed topside to see another vessel emerging from the mist, sleeker than the abandoned ship, with pristine white sails and a figurehead shaped like a human face with hollow eyes. No flag or identification marked its purpose. Hail the vessel. Sabo called across the water. Identify yourselves. A lone figure stood on the approaching ship's deck, an older man with silver hair and a captain's coat draped over his shoulders. Even from a distance, his presence commanded attention. I am Captain Heath, the man's voice carried clearly across the water. Former navigator of the Roger Pirates, current collector of memories. And you, young pirates, have stumbled into my territory. Roger Pirates? Luffy repeated excitedly. You sailed with the Pirate King? Ace tensed visibly at the mention of Roger, his face darkening. I did, Heath confirmed, studying them with interest. And now I know who you are as well. The 3 Captain's Pirates, making quite a name for yourselves in East Blue before venturing to the Grand Line. How do you know about us? Sabo demanded. Heath tapped his temple. Information is power in the Grand Line. I make it my business to know about promising newcomers. His gaze shifted to the abandoned ship. Just as I made it my business to collect from the Silver Key pirates when they entered my waters. What did you do to them? Nami asked, a chill running down her spine despite the suddenly warm air. I took what interested me, Heath replied simply. Their fighting techniques, their navigational knowledge, their experiences, their memories. Devil fruit, Zoro realized aloud. You can steal memories. Heath smiled, neither confirming nor denying. And now I find myself with new subjects to study. 3 captains, including 2D brothers, how fascinating. Without warning, he leapt across the gap between ships with surprising agility for his age, landing lightly on the abandoned vessel's rail. The crew immediately fell into defensive positions. Relax, Heath said, hands raised peacefully. I'm merely introducing myself properly. It's not often I encounter pirates worthy of my attention. What happened to this crew? Ace demanded, flames flickering around his fists. They're alive, if that's your concern, Heath replied dismissively. Memory extraction doesn't kill, though it does leave one rather empty. They're currently on Memoria, my island, living simple lives with simple minds. That's monstrous, Sabo growled. Heath shrugged. Is it? I only take what I value: combat experiences, navigational knowledge, historical information. I leave enough for them to function. Consider it payment for trespassing in my waters. And you think you'll do the same to us? Luffy stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Eventually, Heath admitted candidly. But not today. Today is just reconnaissance. With startling speed, he darted forward, touching his palm briefly to Zoro's forehead before anyone could react. The swordsman staggered backward, momentarily disoriented. Interesting technique, 3-sword style, Heath commented, easily evading Ace's retaliatory fire blast. Self-taught but effective. What did you do? Zoro demanded, shaking his head to clear it. Just a sample, Heath replied, dancing away from Luffy's stretched punch. I can take memories temporarily or permanently. That was just a quick taste, I now know every sword technique you've ever mastered. To demonstrate, he drew a blade from within his coat and perfectly executed Zoro's signature onigiri attack, the air pressure alone cutting the ship's rail. My memory fruit allows me to extract, store, and utilize the memories of others, Heath explained, parrying Sabo's pipe with movements identical to Zoro's style. Over the decades, I've collected thousands of fighting techniques, navigation routes, historical accounts, a living library of experience. The crew attacked in unison, but Heath moved with uncanny precision, countering each of their distinctive styles with perfect anticipation. He touched Usopp briefly, then used the sniper's own signature pellets against them, producing them seemingly from nowhere. I don't just take memories, he called, leaping to avoid Luffy's sweeping kick. I gain every skill, every technique, every ability that isn't devil fruit based. Your muscle memory becomes mine. The battle spilled across both ships, neither side gaining a decisive advantage. Heath couldn't overpower them collectively, but they couldn't land a solid hit on him either. He always seemed to know exactly how they would attack. This is getting us nowhere, Ace growled in frustration after another fire blast missed its mark. Heath landed atop the abandoned ship's cabin, smiling down at them. A good first encounter. You've shown me your basic capabilities, and I've shown you mine. We'll meet again on Memoria, your log pose is already pointing there, isn't it? Nami glanced at her wrist in surprise. The pose had indeed settled on a bearing directly toward where Heath's ship had appeared from. You can run, of course, Heath continued. Try to skip my island. But in the grand line, the path chooses you more often than you choose the path. Memoria is your next destination, whether you wish it or not. With that, he leapt back to his own vessel, which immediately began to retreat into the fog. Until Memoria, 3 captains pirates. I look forward to adding your experiences to my collection. As quickly as he had appeared, Captain Heath was gone, his ship vanishing into the mist like a phantom. The crew was left shaken, not so much by the combat but by the implications of Heath's abilities. He knows how we fight now, Zoro said grimly, sheathing his swords. He's seen our techniques. And he can use them against us, Sabo added. The perfect counter to each of our fighting styles. They returned to the Mary, leaving the abandoned ship to drift. As Nami had confirmed, their log pose pointed inexorably toward what must be Memoria Island. So what do we do? Usopp asked, his usual bravado notably absent. Try to sail around Memoria. We can't, Nami explained reluctantly. The log pose follows magnetic fields between islands. Until it locks onto the next island after recording Memoria's magnetic signature, we have no way to navigate to any other destination. So we have to go to his island, Ace concluded, leaning against the mast with a troubled expression. Into his trap, Sabo added. Luffy, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since Heath's departure, suddenly grinned. Good. Good, the crew echoed in disbelief. Yeah. Luffy punched his palm enthusiastically. Now we know what we're up against. This memory guy thinks he's got us all figured out, but we can surprise him. How exactly do we surprise someone who can read and steal our techniques? Zoro questioned. By using techniques we've never used before, Luffy replied as if it were obvious. Or by fighting differently than usual. The crew exchanged glances, considering the simple but effective logic. If Heath could only utilize what he'd already seen or stolen, then new or altered techniques might give them an edge. It's not a bad idea, Sabo admitted. We have a few days before we reach Memoria, according to the log book. Time to develop some surprises. And we need to be careful about our thoughts and memories, Nami added thoughtfully. If he can extract memories, we should keep any important information, about our past, our weaknesses, our plans, as guarded as possible. The following days were spent in intensive preparation. Each crew member worked to develop variations on their fighting styles that Heath wouldn't have seen. Zoro practiced single and dual sword techniques instead of his signature three-sword style. Ace focused on controlling his fire with greater precision rather than raw power. Sabo explored new applications for his trap fruit abilities. Usopp created new ammunition with effects he'd never tried before. Luffy, meanwhile, seemed oddly unconcerned about changing his approach. My fighting style is improvisation anyway, he explained when Ace questioned him. I never know what I'm going to do until I do it. That might actually be an advantage against Heath, Sabo realized. He can't predict what you'll do if you don't know yourself. As they sailed through the unpredictable weather of the Grand Line, they encountered other vessels, merchant ships that warned them to avoid Memoria, fishing boats that spoke of crew members lost to the Collector, even a marine patrol that seemed suspiciously unconcerned with the rumors. It's like the Marines are allowing Heath to operate, Nami observed after they narrowly avoided the patrol. Maybe they have some arrangement with him. Information, Ace suggested. If he's collecting memories and knowledge from pirates throughout the Grand Line, he'd be a valuable intelligence source. 5 days after their encounter with Heath, Memoria Island appeared on the horizon, a crescent-shaped landmass with a central mountain that resembled a human head in profile. Even from a distance, they could see the gleaming white structures built into the mountainside, contrasting with the lush green forests below. Doesn't look like a villain's lair, Usopp commented, peering through his goggles. The most dangerous places rarely do, Zoro replied. As they approached the island's only harbor, they were surprised to see other ships already docked, vessels of various sizes and origins, but all with one thing in common. Not a single crew member was visible on any of them. The ships of his victims, Nami realized aloud. The harbor itself was immaculately maintained, with pristine white stone docks and automated mooring systems that captured and secured the Mary without human intervention. Still no people were visible, despite the size of the settlement that spread up from the harbor toward the mountain. It's too quiet, Ace murmured as they disembarked cautiously. A harbor this size should be bustling. They didn't have to wonder long. As they reached the main promenade, they finally saw the island's inhabitants, dozens of people moving about their business with slow, methodical precision. Shopkeepers arranging wares, fishermen mending nets, children playing simple games. But something was off about all of them. Their eyes, Sabo whispered. Look at their eyes. Each person they passed had the same vacant stare, a lack of recognition or curiosity that would be normal when strangers arrived. They acknowledged the crew with polite nods but showed no interest or surprise at newcomers. They're like empty shells, Nami said, shuddering slightly. Heath's victims, Ace confirmed grimly. After he took what he wanted from their memories. A child approached them, a little girl with pigtails and the same empty eyes as the adults. The collector welcomes you to Memoria, she recited in a flat voice. Please proceed to the recollection hall at your earliest convenience. And if we don't? Zoro challenged. The girl's expression didn't change. The collector welcomes you to Memoria. Please proceed to the recollection hall at your earliest convenience. She repeated the exact same phrase with identical intonation. She can't process the question, Sabo realized. Heath took her cognitive abilities, her personality. Luffy knelt before the child, his usual smile replaced by an unusual intensity. Don't worry. We're going to fix this. We'll get your memories back. The girl simply repeated her message a third time. Following the child's implicit directions, they made their way through the eerie town toward the mountain. The white structures they'd seen from the sea turned out to be a massive complex built directly into the rock face, a series of domed buildings connected by covered walkways, all gleaming in the sunlight. The recollection hall must be that central building, Nami pointed to the largest dome. It's obviously a trap, Usopp said nervously. He's literally inviting us into his lair. Then we don't all go, Ace decided. Luffy, Sabo, and I will check out the hall. The rest of you explore the island, see if you can find anything useful, where he keeps the stolen memories, if there's any way to reverse the process. I should come too, Zoro insisted. You might need the backup. No, Sabo countered. If something happens to us, the crew will need you. Besides, you've already had some memories taken, you might be more vulnerable to his powers. Reluctantly, the crew split up. Nami, Usopp, and Zoro headed toward the residential area to gather information, while the three brothers approached the imposing recollection hall. The entrance was unguarded, its massive doors standing open in apparent welcome. Inside, the hall lived up to its name, a vast circular chamber with a domed ceiling painted to resemble a night sky. Along the walls, hundreds of glass cases displayed what appeared to be luminescent crystals, each glowing with a different color and intensity. Memories, Ace breathed, understanding immediately. Each crystal contained someone's stolen memories. Very perceptive, Fire Fist, came Heath's voice from the center of the hall. The former Roger pirate sat on an elevated throne-like chair, looking exactly as he had on his ship, silver-haired, distinguished, with an air of absolute confidence. Welcome to my collection. You're sick, Luffy stated bluntly. You can't just steal people's memories and keep them like trophies. Heath smiled indulgently. Such a simplistic view. I'm not a mere thief, I'm a curator, a preserver of experience. When pirates die, their knowledge and skills die with them. I ensure that nothing valuable is lost. By turning people into empty shells. Sabo challenged, gesturing toward the town outside. A regrettable side effect, Heath admitted without remorse. The more significant the memories I extract, the less remains of the original personality. But they live peaceful, productive lives here under my care. They're not living at all, Ace growled. They're just existing. Heath rose from his chair, descending the steps with measured grace. You three fascinate me. Brothers by choice rather than blood, each with your own dream yet traveling together. The parallels to my former crew are striking. We're nothing like the Roger pirates, Ace snapped, his reaction more vehement than his brothers expected. No. Heath raised an eyebrow, studying Ace with newfound interest. Perhaps not in power or achievement, yet. But in spirit? More than you know. He turned to Luffy. Particularly this one. He reminds me very much of our captain. You really sailed with gold, Roger? Luffy asked, momentarily distracted from their confrontation. From East Blue to Laugh Tale and back again, Heath confirmed. I was there for everything, the greatest journey in modern history. And every memory, every moment, is preserved here. He tapped his temple. The perfect record, untainted by time or revisionism. If you respect Roger so much, Sabo said carefully, why did you leave his crew? Why weren't you executed with the others? A shadow crossed Heath's face. I wasn't captured. After Roger surrendered himself, the crew dispersed. Some stayed together, others went into hiding. I realized that the age of pirates he'd initiated would bring countless adventures, countless experiences, too many to be experienced by one man in one lifetime. So you decided to steal others' experiences instead, Ace concluded. I discovered the memory fruit and saw its potential, Heath corrected. With it, I could collect and preserve the most valuable memories of the greatest era of piracy. Every significant battle technique, every hidden route, every historical discovery, all saved rather than lost to time. As they conversed, the brothers had spread out subtly, positioning themselves around Heath. The former Roger pirate noticed but seemed unconcerned. Your defensive positioning is straight from red-haired Shank's playbook, he commented casually. I collected memories from one of his former crewmates some years ago. Effective, but predictable to me. Then predict this. Luffy shouted, launching himself forward with a gum-gum pistol that was deliberately clumsy, telegraphing his move. Heath easily sidestepped, exactly as Luffy intended. The rubber man's real attack came as his extended arms snapped back, changing trajectory mid-return to catch Heath from behind. Impressive adaptation, Heath acknowledged, barely avoiding the second strike. But I've seen rubber powers before. The battle erupted in earnest, the three brothers attacking in coordination while Heath defended with an impossible array of techniques, moving like Zoro one moment, countering with Usopp's projectiles the next, even mimicking some of Ace's non-devil fruit fighting moves. Every style you throw at me, I've seen before. Heath called, dancing between their attacks. Every technique has a counter that I've collected over decades. Despite their preparations, the brothers found themselves struggling. Heath hadn't been exaggerating about his collection of combat knowledge, he seemed to have an answer for everything they attempted, even their newly developed variations. We need something completely unexpected, Sabo called to his brothers as they regrouped after another failed assault. Luffy nodded, his face unusually serious. I have an idea. Something I've never done before. Before he could elaborate, Heath pressed his attack, moving with blinding speed to touch Ace's forehead briefly before the fire user could ignite his defense. Interesting, Heath murmured, jumping away as Ace unleashed a column of flame in retaliation. So much anger toward Roger. I wonder why. Ace's expression contorted with rage and something else, fear. What did you see? He demanded, his flames intensifying with his emotions. Just fragments, Heath replied, studying Ace with new interest. But enough to raise questions. Your hatred for the Pirate King seems personal. While Heath was focused on Ace, Luffy had been steadily moving into position. Now, he executed his improvised plan, stretching his arms to grab two of the memory crystals from their cases. Put those down. Heath shouted, genuine alarm in his voice for the first time. Those are irreplaceable. Then maybe you'll listen, Luffy replied, holding the glowing crystals precariously. Release everyone's memories and let them go, or I'll destroy these. Heath's confident demeanor cracked. You don't understand what you're threatening, boy. Those contain the life experiences of two master navigators, decades of Grand Line knowledge that would die without my preservation. Knowledge stolen from people who are still alive, Sabo countered, understanding Luffy's strategy. Knowledge that belongs to them, not you. For a tense moment, Heath seemed to be calculating his options. Then, with a speed that caught even Luffy off guard, he lunged forward, hands outstretched toward the crystals. Ace, now! Luffy shouted. Ace unleashed not a blast of fire but a focused beam of intense heat, precisely aimed not at Heath but at the dome above. The glass structure, superheated in one spot, cracked sharply. Sunlight poured through, creating a spotlight that struck the crystals in Luffy's hands. The effect was immediate and spectacular. The crystals blazed with light, releasing glowing streams of luminescent energy that swirled around the hall like living things. "No!" Heath cried in genuine anguish. "What have you done?" "Freed them," Luffy answered simply. Outside, they could hear shouting as the released memories presumably found their original owners. Heath stared in horror as more crystals began to resonate with the escaping memories, their cases cracking open spontaneously. "My collection," he whispered, watching as decades of stolen experiences flooded out of the hull. "My life's work." "Your victims' lives," Sabo corrected. Heath's shock gave way to fury. With a roar of rage, he charged Luffy, hands glowing with what must be his memory extraction technique at full power. "I'll take everything," he threatened. "Every memory you've ever had." Luffy stood his ground, waiting until the last possible second before executing the move he'd been saving, a technique he truly had never attempted before. As Heath's glowing hands reached for his head, Luffy's arms and legs suddenly twisted like corkscrews, his entire body rotating in place at impossible speeds. "Gum Gum Tornado," he shouted, becoming a rubber whirlwind that caught Heath and sent him spinning across the hull. The former Roger pirate crashed into the wall of remaining crystal cases, shattering dozens more. The released memories exploded outward in a wave of light and color that briefly blinded everyone in the hull. When visibility returned, Heath lay amidst the wreckage of his collection, surrounded by broken crystal and fading wisps of memory energy. The brothers approached cautiously, ready for a final desperate attack, but Heath simply stared up at the broken dome, tears streaming down his face. "You can't understand," he said quietly. "What it means to have sailed with Roger, to have seen what we saw, and then to live in the shadow of those memories. Everything after was less." "So you tried to live through stolen experiences instead," Ace said, his earlier rage tempered by something like pity. "I preserved history," Heath insisted, but the conviction had drained from his voice. "Techniques that would have been lost, knowledge that would have died with its bearers. At the cost of those bearers' very selves," Sabo countered. "That wasn't your choice to make." Outside, the sounds of confusion and joy grew as more islanders presumably regained their stolen memories. Heath closed his eyes, defeat evident in every line of his body. "What will you do with me?" he asked finally. "Kill me for my crimes?" "No," Luffy stated firmly. "But you're going to help everyone you hurt." Before Heath could respond, the hull doors burst open. Zoro, Nami, and Usopp rushed in, accompanied by a crowd of islanders, but these were not the vacant-eyed shells from before. These people moved with purpose, their expressions ranging from confusion to outrage as they spotted Heath. "The memories are returning to people all over the island," Nami reported. "And they remember everything, including who took their memories in the first place." The crowd surged forward, their intent toward Heath clear. Surprisingly, it was Ace who stepped between them and the fallen collector. "He'll face justice," Ace assured them. "But not mob justice." "What kind of justice can compensate for years of stolen life?" demanded a burly man at the front of the crowd. "The kind where he uses his knowledge to help you all get home," Sabo suggested. "Many of you have been gone for years. The Grand Line has changed, and your ships may not be seaworthy anymore." The suggestion gave the crowd pause. A woman stepped forward, the captain of one of the ships in the harbor, her memory and authority clearly restored. A fitting punishment, she agreed after consideration. Heath will use his collected navigational knowledge to chart safe courses home for every crew he's victimized, and provide resources from his considerable wealth to repair or replace our vessels. The crowd murmured agreement, the thirst for immediate vengeance giving way to practical considerations of returning to lives long interrupted. As the islanders took Heath into their custody to begin the process of restitution, the three captains' pirates found themselves celebrated as liberators. That evening, a feast was arranged in the town square, the formerly empty-eyed residents now animated with personality and joy as they reclaimed their lives and identities. During the celebration, Ace slipped away, finding a quiet spot on the harbor wall to stare out at the sea. Sabo joined him shortly after, sitting beside his brother in companionable silence. "He saw something in your memories," Sabo finally said. "Something about Roger." Ace's jaw tightened. "It doesn't matter." "It matters if it's eating you up inside," Sabo countered gently. "We've always shared everything, the three of us." "Not this," Ace replied, his voice strained. "This is my burden to bear." "No burden is only yours when you have brothers," came Luffy's voice as he plopped down on Ace's other side, a piece of meat still clutched in his hand. "That's what being brothers means." Ace looked between them, conflict evident in his expression. Finally, he sighed, seeming to deflate as the tension left his body. "Gold Roger was my father," he admitted, the words emerging as if physically painful. "My biological father. The Pirate King's son, that's who I am." Silence followed his revelation, broken only by the distant sounds of celebration and the gentle lapping of waves against the harbor wall. "So?" Luffy finally said, taking another bite of meat. Ace stared at him incredulously. "So? The most hated man in the world, the man whose blood condemned me before I was even born, that's my legacy." "No," Sabo shook his head firmly. "Your legacy is what you choose to make it. Roger's blood might run in your veins, but it doesn't define you." Besides, Luffy added with characteristic directness, Roger was awesome. He sailed the whole Grand Line and found the One Piece. Having him as a dad sounds pretty cool to me. Ace couldn't help the short laugh that escaped him. "Only you would see it that way, Luffy." "He's not wrong though," Sabo pressed. "You've spent your whole life running from Roger's shadow, but maybe there are parts of his legacy worth embracing. Heath knew him, sailed with him, and whatever else Heath became, he respected Roger enough to dedicate his life to preserving those memories." Ace was quiet for a long moment, considering his brother's words. "I've hated him for so long," he finally said. "For dying, for leaving my mother to protect me alone, for the world that wants me dead just for existing." "The world doesn't know who you are," Luffy pointed out. "And even if they did, the people who matter wouldn't care." "We don't. Never have, never will," Sabo confirmed. "You're our brother, Ace. Not Roger's son, not to us." The tension that had gripped Ace since Heath's memory extraction finally seemed to release. He didn't smile, exactly, but something in his expression lightened. "Thanks," he said simply. "Both of you." They sat together watching the stars reflect on the Grand Line's unpredictable waters. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as they always had, together. The next morning brought a flurry of activity as the liberated crews prepared to depart Memoria. The log pose had reset during the night, now pointing toward their next destination. Heath, under the watchful eyes of his former victims, had provided navigational charts and weather predictions for each crew's journey home. "What will happen to this place?" Nami asked as they prepared the Mary for departure. "The captains have decided to dismantle most of it," Zoro replied, having attended the impromptu council meeting earlier. "Destroy the memory extraction equipment, but keep the harbor as a safe haven for sailors. Might be useful to have a neutral port this early in the Grand Line." As they worked, a small boat approached the Mary. Two figures were aboard, Heath, his proud bearing now replaced with humble contrition, and a woman they recognized as the captain who had spoken for the victims. "Permission to come aboard?" the woman called. "We have something for you." Luffy welcomed them onto the deck, where Heath presented a sealed chest. "These are for you," he said, opening it to reveal 5 log poses and a set of detailed maps. "The best navigational aids I collected over the years. They'll show you safe routes through some of the Grand Line's most treacherous sectors." "Why give these to us?" Ace asked suspiciously. "Because you earned them," the woman captain answered. And because we've asked Heath to provide one final service before we determine his ultimate fate. Heath looked up, meeting Ace's eyes directly. I knew your father, he said quietly. Not just as my captain, but as a man. What I saw in your memories, your hatred, your doubt, it's based on the world's perception of Roger, not the truth of who he was. Ace stiffened. You don't know anything about, I sailed with him for years, Heath interrupted with unexpected firmness. I was there when he laughed on Laugh Tale. I was there when he made the decision to surrender himself. I was there when he spoke of the woman he loved, who was carrying his child. The deck fell silent, even the distant sounds of the harbor seeming to fade as Ace stared at the former Roger pirate. He knew about me? Ace asked, his voice barely audible. Heath nodded. He did. And he was joyful. In all my years of sailing with Roger, I never saw him as happy as when he spoke of the child who would carry his legacy, not as Pirate King, but as a free soul who could choose their own path. Ace's expression was unreadable, a complex mix of emotions washing across his features. Why should I believe you? After everything you've done? You shouldn't, Heath acknowledged. But the memories don't lie. He gestured to the chest. There's one more item in there. A crystal containing my own memories of Roger, the Real Roger, not the monster the world government painted him to be. Take it or destroy it, but know that it holds the truth. Indeed, nestled among the navigation tools lay a crystal that glowed with a deep, vibrant red. Ace stared at it, conflict evident in his posture. We'll consider it, Sabo answered when Ace remained silent. Thank you for the navigation aids. After Heath and the captain departed, the crew gathered around the chest, each processing the unexpected gift differently. Are you going to view the memories? Nami asked Ace gently. I don't know, he admitted. Part of me wants to know the truth. But another part is afraid of what you'll find, Zoro finished for him. That your hatred might have been misplaced all these years. Ace nodded silently. You don't have to decide now, Luffy said, closing the chest carefully. We've got a whole Grand Line to explore. Plenty of time to figure it out. The wind picked up, filling the Mary's sails as they prepared to leave Memoria behind. As they navigated out of the harbor, they could see the islanders dismantling Heath's memory collection facilities, reclaiming the island for whatever new purpose they might choose. Where to next, navigator? Sabo asked Nami, who was studying their new collection of log poses. She selected one and strapped it to her wrist. According to Heath's maps, there's an archipelago 3 days' sail from here, the Boiling Islands. Known for their hot springs, unique cuisine, and, apparently a famous doctor who specializes in treating the impossible. Doctor? Luffy perked up. Like, a crew doctor. Possibly, Nami conceded. The notes say he's eccentric but brilliant. Then that's our heading, Ace decided, seeming eager to leave Memoria and its revelations behind. The Boiling Islands it is. As the Mary caught the Grand Line's unpredictable winds, the 3 captains' pirates set course for their next adventure, each member changed in subtle ways by their encounter with the memory collector. For Ace, a seed of doubt had been planted about the father he'd always hated. For Luffy, a reinforced conviction about the importance of memories and dreams. For Sabo, new insights into the legacy of the pirate age. And in the crystal that now rested securely in Ace's quarters, memories waited, memories that might reshape his understanding of his own identity and the father whose blood ran in his veins. Whether he would ever view them remained his choice, but the option now existed where before there had been only hatred and rejection. The Grand Line stretched before them, vast and mysterious, ready to test their strength, their resolve, and most importantly, their bond as brothers and crew. Whatever challenges awaited at the Boiling Islands and beyond, they would face them together, not just as the 3 captains' pirates, but as a family forged by choice rather than blood. Chapter 3, Divided Dreams. The Going Merry cut through the Grand Line's unpredictable waters with surprising grace, bearing its crew of dreamers toward their next adventure. 3 weeks had passed since their encounter with Heath on Memoria Island, and those weeks had transformed them from East Blue rookies into a crew beginning to understand the true nature of the world's most dangerous sea. Islands ahead. Usopp called from the crow's nest, his goggles zoomed to maximum. Looks like a cluster of them. The crew gathered at the bow, watching as the horizon revealed not one island but several, arranged in a rough semicircle around a central landmass. The islands varied dramatically, one covered in dense jungle, another with a smoking volcano at its center, a third appearing to be entirely man-made structures. Crossroads Archipelago, Nami announced, consulting one of Heath's maps. The central island is a major trading hub where merchants from all over the Grand Line converge. The surrounding islands each have different specialties and political affiliations. Political affiliations? Sabo repeated, suddenly more interested. Nami nodded. According to these notes, the western islands align with the world government, the eastern ones operate independently, and the southern islands have. She hesitated, glancing at Sabo, revolutionary sympathies. Revolutionary? Ace asked, catching the significance immediately. The Revolutionary Army, Sabo murmured, his expression unreadable. During their journey from Memoria, they had successfully recruited a ship's doctor, a reindeer named Tony Chopper with the human fruit powers who had studied under the brilliant but eccentric Dr. Kureha on the boiling islands. The little reindeer was still adjusting to life with humans who accepted his hybrid nature, often hiding the wrong way behind masts and barrels when overwhelmed. What's the Revolutionary Army? Chopper asked now, peeking out from behind Zoro's leg. Rebels who oppose the world government, Zoro explained simply. Criminals and terrorists, according to marine propaganda, Sabo added with a slight edge to his voice. Freedom fighters working to expose corruption and liberate oppressed nations, according to others. Sounds like you know a lot about them, Nami observed shrewdly. Sabo adjusted his top hat, a habit when uncomfortable. I've read widely on world politics. Luffy, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, suddenly pointed toward the central island. Look! That town is huge. Bet they have amazing food. The central island of the Crossroads Archipelago was indeed impressive, a sprawling port city surrounded by towering cliffs, with buildings climbing upward in concentric rings. Ships of all sizes crowded the harbor, flying flags from nations throughout the Grand Line and beyond. Crossroads proper, Nami read from her notes. Officially neutral territory by ancient agreement. No Marines, no pirates, no revolutionaries permitted to engage in hostilities within its boundaries. Sounds like the perfect place to resupply without trouble, Usopp said hopefully. Ace laughed. When have we ever gone anywhere without finding trouble? Or making it, Zoro added dryly. They guided the Mary toward the bustling harbor, where Harbormaster's assistants directed them to an available berth. Unlike many ports they'd visited, no one here seemed concerned about their pirate flag, merely noting it in a ledger and collecting a standard docking fee. Welcome to Crossroads, said the dockworker, a weathered woman with arms like ship's cables. 3 rules, no fighting, no recruitment, no politics. Break M, you're banned for life. Simple enough. Crystal clear, Sabo replied, handling the transaction while Luffy bounced impatiently behind him. Good. Enjoy your stay. She handed them a crude map of the city. Market districts up the first tier, information exchanges on the second, specialty services on the third. Top tiers private residences and administration, off limits without invitation. As they disembarked, the scale of Crossroads became even more apparent. The city was built in circular tiers that climbed the inside of a massive caldera, connected by grand staircases and mechanical lifts. Each level seemed to have its own character, the harbor level bustling with sailors and cargo, the first tier above colorful with market stalls, the second more sedate with official-looking buildings. We should split up, Nami suggested practically. Cover more ground, get what we need faster. And meet back at the ship by sunset, Ace added, his protective instinct showing. This place might be neutral, but that just means the threats aren't obvious. They divided into groups. Nami and Usopp headed for the market to haggle for supplies, Zoro and Chopper went to find medical provisions, and the three brothers decided to explore the information exchanges on the second tier, hoping to learn more about what lay ahead in their Grand Line journey. The information exchanges proved to be a fascinating mix of public libraries, private intelligence brokers, bounty offices, and news distributors. People from all walks of life gathered here to trade knowledge as valuable as any currency. "Check this out," Sabo said, pointing to a bulletin board covered with bounty posters. Among them were three that caught their attention: Fire Fist ACE, 320 million berries; Straw Hat, Luffy, 100 million berries; Blue Gentleman, Sabo, 160 million berries. When did they give me a name? Sabo wondered, adjusting his top hat. Blue Gentleman. Ace snickered. Suits you, though. My bounty's getting bigger. Luffy celebrated, drawing annoyed glances from nearby patrons seeking quieter exchanges. It means the world government is taking us more seriously, Ace cautioned, studying his own poster. Mine went up after Memoria. They must have learned about our clash with Heath. As they examined the bounties, a voice spoke behind them, cool, measured, with an underlying tone of authority. Impressive numbers for rookies fresh from East Blue. They turned to find a tall man in civilian clothes, though something about his bearing screamed military. He wore tinted glasses and had curly black hair with a sleep mask pushed up on his forehead. "Can we help you?" Sabo asked politely but cautiously. The man shrugged casually. "Just making conversation. It's not every day you see three captains on one crew, especially with bounties climbing so quickly." He extended a hand. Kuzan. Information broker, of sorts. Ace hesitated before accepting the handshake. "You seem to know who we are." "Information is my business," Kuzan replied with a lazy smile. "And you three have been making quite the splash. Defeating Buggy, exposing Kuro, liberating Memoria, impressive resume." "We just do what feels right," Luffy said simply. Kuzan studied him with sudden intensity. "Monkey D. Luffy. You're Garp's grandson, aren't you?" The brothers tensed simultaneously. Garp's name was not one they expected to hear in the Grand Line. "How do you know Gramps?" Luffy asked, guarded for once. "Professional acquaintance," Kuzan answered vaguely. "He speaks highly of you, when he's not complaining about your career choice." His gaze shifted to the other brothers. "All three of you, in fact." Though he never mentioned that Ace was Gold Roger's son. The temperature around Ace spiked noticeably as his control over his fire powers slipped. "Who the hell are you really?" Kuzan raised his hands placatingly. "Relax. Crossroads has a neutrality policy, remember? I'm not here to cause trouble. Just curious about the three captains everyone's talking about." "We're not interested in being anyone's curiosity," Sabo stated firmly, placing a calming hand on Ace's shoulder. "If you'll excuse us, we have business to attend to." "Of course," Kuzan nodded, stepping aside. "Just one thing before you go, each of you might find something of particular interest in Crossroads. Luffy, there's a retired explorer on the third tier who claims to have sailed with Roger to Laugh Tale. Ace, representatives from the Whitebeard pirates are currently in port, seeking new allies. And Sabo, well, let's just say the southern islands have visitors who might share your political interests." The brothers exchanged glances, their silent communication developed over years of brotherhood. "Why tell us this?" Ace demanded. Kuzan shrugged again, the gesture almost too casual. "Like I said, information is my business. Consider this a professional courtesy." He turned to leave, then paused. "One last thing, watch the weather. There's a cold front moving in." He walked away, disappearing into the crowd with surprising ease for such a tall man. "I don't trust him," Ace said immediately. "Me neither," Sabo agreed. "He knows too much." And that comment about Garp felt like bait. Luffy, however, was focused on something else entirely. Someone who went to Laugh Tale with Roger. I gotta meet him. Luffy, focus, Ace chided. That guy was suspicious. Probably lying to separate us. But what if he wasn't? Luffy countered, uncharacteristically serious. This could be my chance to learn something about the One Piece. Sabo frowned thoughtfully. And Whitebeard pirates in port, that's significant for you, Ace. You've always wanted to measure yourself against Whitebeard. Ace couldn't deny it. The legendary Edward Newgate, called Whitebeard, was said to be the only man who could fight Roger as an equal. Since learning of his parentage, Ace had developed a complex fascination with the man. What about you? Ace asked Sabo. The revolutionary connection. A shadow crossed Sabo's face. Just a coincidence. But. He hesitated. I have been wondering about their work. Their goals align with many of my own thoughts on world justice. For perhaps the first time since they'd set sail together, a moment of genuine tension stretched between the brothers, not anger, but the quiet recognition that their individual dreams might pull them in different directions. Luffy broke the silence in typical fashion. Let's check everything out. We've got time before meeting back at the ship. We should stick together, Ace insisted. Why? Luffy challenged. We're in a neutral port. No fighting allowed, remember? That doesn't mean it's safe, Ace argued. That Kazan guy knew things he shouldn't. All the more reason to gather information of our own, Sabo reasoned. We could each investigate these leads, then meet to compare what we learn. Ace recognized the logic but still hesitated. I don't like splitting up here. 2 hours, Sabo proposed. We each take 2 hours to follow our leads, then meet at that cafe we passed near the harbor. If anyone doesn't show, the others come looking. After further discussion, they reluctantly agreed to the plan. Luffy would seek out the retired explorer on the 3rd tier, Ace would investigate the Whitebeard pirates' presence, and Sabo would casually explore the Southern Islands delegation without committing to anything. As they separated, none noticed the ice crystals forming briefly in Kazan's footprints before melting away in the afternoon sun. Luffy bounded up to the 3rd tier, his excitement growing with each step. The specialty services level was considerably more upscale than the lower tiers, with elegant shops, exclusive clubs, and private consultation offices. Finding a retired explorer might be challenging without more specific directions. He stopped a passing vendor carrying trays of exotic fruits. Hey! Do you know any old guys who sailed with Gold Roger? The vendor nearly dropped his trays in shock at the directness of the question. Lower your voice when asking about such things, young man. But. He leaned closer. There's an old sea captain who runs the Horizon's Edge Tavern at the north end of this tier. Can't verify his claims, but he tells stories about the old days. Thanking the vendor with a purchased fruit that disappeared in one rubbery bite, Luffy headed north. The Horizon's Edge proved to be unlike any tavern he'd visited before, more museum than bar, with nautical artifacts covering every wall and hanging from the ceiling. Maps, compasses, figurines, weapons, each item looked rare and valuable. Behind the bar stood an elderly man with a shock of white hair and a beard to match. Despite his age, his arms were corded with muscle, and his eyes remained sharp as they tracked Luffy's entrance. We're closed for a private event tonight, the old man called. Come back tomorrow. Are you the guy who sailed with Gold Roger? Luffy asked, ignoring the dismissal. The tavern, which had a few early patrons scattered at tables, went silent. The old bartender's expression hardened. Who's asking? Monkey D. Luffy. I'm gonna be king of the pirates. A few patrons chuckled nervously, but the old man's eyes narrowed. Big claim, boy. What makes you think you've got what it takes? Luffy approached the bar, meeting the man's gaze directly. Because I'm free. And I've got the best crew in the world. Something in his simple conviction caused the old man to pause. He studied Luffy more carefully, his gaze lingering on the straw hat. That hat, it reminds me of something. He gestured to a stool. Sit. First drinks on the house for anyone bold enough to declare their ambition so openly. As the bartender poured a mug of juice, correctly guessing Luffy's preference, he introduced himself. Name's Rayler. Captain Rayler, once upon a time. Did you really sail with Roger? Luffy asked eagerly. Rayler's expression grew distant. Not as a crewmate. I was captain of a merchant vessel that supplied their ship several times during their journey. Spoke with Roger himself on 3 occasions. He leaned closer. Including once after they'd been to Laugh Tale. Luffy's eyes widened. You know about the One Piece. Keep your voice down, Rayler warned. And no, I don't know what the treasure is, if that's what you're asking. Roger never revealed that. But he did tell me something about Laugh Tale that few know. He glanced around the tavern, then motioned for Luffy to follow him to a back room. Inside was what appeared to be Rayler's private collection, even more impressive artifacts, carefully preserved behind glass. Roger said that Laugh Tale can only be found by those who can hear its call, Rayler said quietly, removing a small object from a locked cabinet. And only those with the will of D have ever heard it. Will of D? Luffy repeated, confused. Like my middle initial? Rayler nodded. Exactly like that. Roger was D. And he said it wasn't coincidence. He placed the object on a table between them, a small, cube-shaped stone with strange symbols carved into each face. This is a road poneglyph rubbing. Not the real thing, of course, just a copy made from wax. But the symbols are accurate. Poneglyph. Luffy studied the strange markings with unusual focus. Ancient stones that point the way to Laugh Tale. 4 of them, scattered across the Grand Line. Find all 4, interpret them correctly, and they reveal the route. Luffy reached out to touch the cube, then hesitated. Why show me this? Rayler smiled sadly. Because you reminded me of him for a moment. That same certainty, that same freedom in your eyes. He pushed the cube toward Luffy. Take it. It's just a copy, but it might help you recognize the real thing if you ever encounter it. Really? Thanks. Luffy picked up the cube, turning it over in his hands. But I still don't understand, the will of D thing. What does it mean? Rayler's expression grew serious. Roger said those who carry D are natural enemies of the gods. I never understood what he meant by that, but he believed the initial marked those destined to change the world. Before Luffy could ask more questions, a bell jangled from the tavern. Rayler frowned. My suppliers are early. Listen, boy, if you're serious about finding One Piece, seek out the road poneglyphs. But be careful who you trust with that knowledge. The world government has killed for less. He ushered Luffy toward a back exit. One more thing, Roger laughed when he found the treasure. Whatever it is, it wasn't what anyone expected. Luffy pocketed the stone cube, mind racing with more questions than answers. As he stepped into the alley behind the tavern, he caught a glimpse of someone entering the front door, a tall figure with a sleep mask pushed up on his forehead. Kuzan. The information broker, from earlier. Acting on instinct, Luffy ducked behind a stack of barrels rather than immediately leaving. Through a small window, he could see Kuzan approaching Rayler at the bar. Admiral Akiji, Rayler greeted, his cordial tone from earlier replaced with cold formality. You risk much coming here in person. Admiral. Luffy froze. Not an information broker at all, a marine admiral in disguise. Crossroads neutrality protects even me, old friend, Kuzan, or Akiji, replied casually. Was that Monkey D. Luffy I just missed? This is a public establishment. Many people come and go. Don't play games, Rayler. I know you spoke with him. What did you tell him? Nothing that violates my agreement with the world government. Akiji sighed heavily. The three captains' pirates are becoming a problem. Especially with the summit approaching. Sensitivity is high. Not my concern, Rayler replied stiffly. I've kept my end of our bargain for 20 years. I don't reveal Roger's secrets. See that you maintain that policy, Akiji warned, his casual demeanor slipping to reveal something colder beneath. Even Crossroads neutrality has limits. Luffy had heard enough. He needed to warn his brothers immediately. Carefully, he slipped away from the tavern, the stone cube weighing heavily in his pocket along with this new, troubling information. While Luffy explored the third tier, Ace had made his way to a section of the harbor known for its rougher clientele. If Whitebeard pirates were in port, they wouldn't be lounging in the upscale areas. Sure enough, after asking around, and igniting his fist once to prove he wasn't a marine spy, Ace was directed to a dockside tavern called the Moby's Rest, an obvious reference to Whitebeard's famous ship, the Moby Dick. The tavern was packed with tough-looking sailors, many sporting tattoos similar to the one Ace had glimpsed on wanted posters, a purple cross with a crescent mustache, Whitebeard's mark. Ace adjusted his hat lower over his eyes and found a spot at the crowded bar. "What'll it be?" asked the bartender, a burly woman with scars across her knuckles. "Information, if you're selling," Ace replied quietly. Heard Whitebeard's crew might be recruiting. The bartender's expression didn't change, but she looked past Ace to someone seated at a corner table, giving a slight nod. "Drinks on the house while you wait," she said, sliding a mug toward him. "Someone will be with you shortly." Ace nursed his drink, senses alert as he studied the room's reflection in the mirror behind the bar. Most patrons ignored him, focused on their own conversations, but a few kept casting glances his way. After several minutes, a chair scraped beside him, and a man with a pompadour hairstyle sat down. Despite his comical hair, everything else about him exuded danger, from his muscled physique to the easy confidence with which he carried himself. "Heard you're asking about Pops," the man said without preamble. "Just curious about recruitment," Ace replied carefully. The man grinned. "I'm Thatch, 4th Division Commander of the Whitebeard Pirates. And you're Fire Fist Ace, unless I miss my guess." When Ace tensed, Thatch raised a hand. "Relax. Crossroads neutrality, remember? Besides, we make it our business to know about promising rookies." "Is Whitebeard here?" Ace asked directly. Thatch laughed. "Pops? Nah. He rarely leaves the Moby Dick these days. But several of us commanders are here on business." He studied Ace with open curiosity. "Why the interest? Looking to challenge him?" "Many have tried." "No," Ace answered truthfully. "Or at least, not only that. I have questions only he might answer." "About Roger?" Thatch asked, his voice dropping lower. Ace couldn't hide his surprise. "How did, we have our sources," Thatch interrupted. "And the resemblance is there, if you know what to look for. Pops knew your old man well, fought him countless times." The casual way Thatch mentioned Roger, without hatred or awe, just matter-of-fact acknowledgement, caught Ace off guard. He'd spent his life hearing Roger's name spoken with either reverence or disgust, never this simple acceptance. "What's he like?" Ace found himself asking. "Whitebeard." Thatch's expression softened. "The greatest man I've ever known. Strongest too, but that's not why we follow him." He touched the tattoo visible on his chest. "We're his sons, all of us. A family by choice rather than blood." The words resonated deeply with Ace, reminding him of his own brothers. "You didn't answer about recruitment," Ace noted. "We're always looking for strong pirates who understand the meaning of family," Thatch replied. "And from what we've heard, you'd fit right in." He leaned closer. "Word is you're strong, loyal, and protective of your brothers. Pops values those qualities." "I already have a crew," Ace said, though something in Thatch's description called to him. Your brothers, Thatch nodded. They'd be welcome too, of course. Though from what I hear, Straw Hat has his own ambitions that might not align with Pop's. Before Ace could respond, another man approached their table, taller than Thatch, with a serious expression and a shock of blonde hair styled to resemble a pineapple. We've got company, the newcomer said quietly to Thatch. Marine presence in the harbor. Can't be, Thatch frowned. Crossroads doesn't allow marine operations. This one's off the books. Marco spotted Akiji near the customs house. Ace straightened at the familiar name. Tall guy. Sleep mask. Calls himself Kazan. Both commanders turned to him in surprise. You've met him? The blond man asked sharply. Earlier today. He approached me and my brothers, claimed to be an information broker. The commanders exchanged concerned glances. That's not good, Thatch said. Akiji doesn't make social calls. We should move up our departure, the blond man decided. Then, noticing Ace's confusion, he introduced himself. Marco, 1st Division Commander. And if Akiji's taking a personal interest in you, kid, you've got problems. He's an admiral, Thatch explained, seeing Ace's blank look. One of the Marines' ultimate weapons. Ice powers, and a ruthless streak despite his lazy act. Ace felt a chill that had nothing to do with ice powers. My brothers, we split up to explore Crossroads. Find them, Marco advised grimly. If Akiji's here in person rather than sending vice admirals, he has authorization for extreme measures, neutrality agreement or not. What about Whitebeard? Ace asked, standing to leave. You said he could answer my questions. Thatch pulled a blank piece of paper from his pocket and quickly scribbled something before pressing it into Ace's hand. Eternal pose coordinates. If you decide you want those answers, come find us. Pops would be interested in meeting Roger's son. And if Akiji becomes a problem, Marco added, having Whitebeard's flag might make the Marines reconsider their approach. Something to think about. Ace pocketed the paper, mind racing. Thanks for the warning. One pirate to another, Thatch grinned. Besides, I like your style. Hope to see you again, Fire Fist. As Ace hurried from the tavern, the magnitude of the situation sank in. An admiral in Crossroads, specifically interested in him and his brothers. Whitebeard pirates offering protection and answers. And somewhere in the city, his brothers potentially walking into danger, unaware. He needed to find them quickly. Sabo's exploration had taken him to the southeastern dock, where vessels from the southern islands moored. Unlike the main harbor, this area was noticeably less crowded, with more security checks and private berths. The revolutionary sympathies of the southern islands clearly warranted additional caution, even in neutral Crossroads. After observing for a while, Sabo approached a checkpoint leading to a secluded section of docks. Two guards in nondescript clothing, deliberately avoiding any revolutionary insignia while in Crossroads, stopped him with professional courtesy. Private docking area, one stated. Invitation only. Sabo nodded respectfully. I was told representatives from the southern islands might be interested in my particular skill set. The guards exchanged glances. And what skill set would that be? Information analysis, strategic planning, Sabo replied carefully. And a certain, mechanical aptitude. One guard's eyes narrowed slightly at the last comment. Wait here. While the guard stepped away to consult someone via Den Mushi, Sabo maintained a relaxed posture despite his internal tension. This was a risk, openly approaching revolutionary operatives, but something about being in Crossroads had crystallized thoughts he'd been having since acquiring the trap fruit. The guard returned, accompanied by a woman with purple hair cropped short and intelligent eyes that missed nothing about Sabo's appearance. I'll handle this, she told the guards before addressing Sabo. You're either very brave or very foolish, approaching us so directly. Follow me. She led him through the checkpoint to a small office overlooking the private docks. Inside, maps covered the walls, though Sabo noticed they were deliberately innocuous shipping routes rather than anything revealing revolutionary operations. "My name is Koala," the woman said once the door closed behind them. "And you're, Blue Gentleman, Sabo of the Three Captains Pirates." "You know who I am," Sabo stated, unsurprised. "We make it our business to know about pirate crews with interesting politics," she replied. "Your actions at Memoria were particularly noteworthy. Freeing people from mental slavery rather than simply taking the treasure and running." "It was the right thing to do," Sabo said simply. Koala smiled for the first time. "That's exactly the sort of answer we look for." She gestured to a chair. "You mentioned a mechanical aptitude. The trap fruit, correct? Rumor has it you acquired it recently. News travels fast. In some channels." She studied him openly. "Do you know why I agreed to meet you, Sabo? Because a devil fruit user could be useful to your cause. Because your name has come up before, in our organization." She pulled a folder from a drawer and slid it across the desk. "Open it." Inside was a photograph that made Sabo's breath catch, a much younger version of himself, perhaps 10 years old, dressed in noble's clothing and standing stiffly beside a man and woman he didn't recognize. "Where did you get this?" he demanded, a sudden headache flaring behind his eyes. "East Blue Nobility Registry," Koala replied, watching his reaction carefully. "The Outlook family of Goa Kingdom. Their eldest son, Sabo, disappeared 10 years ago, presumed dead after an incident involving a fishing boat and a celestial dragon's ship." The headache intensified as fragmented images flashed through Sabo's mind: a burning boat, an explosion, pain, darkness. "I don't remember," he admitted, pressing a hand to his temple. "My earliest clear memories are of living in the forest with Ace and Luffy." "Amnesia," Koala nodded as if confirming a suspicion. "Our chief believes you may have been injured during your escape from Goa, resulting in memory loss." "Your chief?" Sabo echoed, still struggling with the revelation. "Dragon," she confirmed. "Leader of the Revolutionary Army. He personally pulled a boy from the water after a celestial dragon destroyed a fishing boat leaving Goa during a visit. That boy was you, Sabo." The name triggered another flash, a tattoo glimpsed on the arm of the man who saved him, a dragon curling around a globe. "Why didn't he keep me with the revolutionaries then?" Sabo asked, logical even amid his confusion. "You were critically injured. He left you in the care of trusted people in East Blue until you recovered." Koala's expression softened. "But by then, you had found your brothers and showed no signs of remembering your past." Dragon chose not to interfere. "Until now," Sabo concluded. "Until you started making waves as a pirate with revolutionary leanings," she corrected. "And acquired a devil fruit power that could be extremely valuable to our cause." Sabo sat back, trying to process everything. "So Dragon, the most wanted man in the world, believes I was once a noble who rejected that life, and now wants me to join the Revolutionary Army?" "He believes you would be an asset," Koala confirmed. "And that your true calling lies with us, not piracy." She leaned forward. "Think about it, Sabo. Your skills, your fruit, your instinct for justice, they align perfectly with our mission." Before Sabo could respond, a rapid knock sounded at the door. Koala frowned at the interruption but called for the person to enter. A revolutionary operative rushed in, his expression urgent. "Admiral Akiji is in Crossroads. He's been asking about the Three Captains Pirates." Koala immediately stood. "An admiral, here? That violates the neutrality agreement. He's not in uniform, operating covertly." But 3 separate sources confirmed his identity. She turned to Sabo, suddenly businesslike. "You need to find your brothers and leave Crossroads immediately. The presence of an admiral suggests the world government has designated you as significant threats." But we haven't done anything to warrant that level of response, Sabo protested, though even as he spoke, he knew it wasn't entirely true. Their actions at Memoria, their rising bounties, their connection to Roger through Ace. The Summit of Kings begins in 3 days, Koala explained rapidly. Every 12 years, the world government gathers celestial dragons and world leaders to reaffirm the global order. Security is at its highest. Any perceived threats are eliminated preemptively. Sabo stood, the folder with his childhood photo still in his hand. I need to warn my brothers. Take this, Koala pressed a small device into his palm. Emergency transponder snail, tuned to our frequency. If Akiji corners you, use it. We can't openly oppose an admiral, but we can create diversions. Why help me? Sabo asked, pocketing the device. Because Dragon believes in you, she answered simply. And because I think he's right. As Sabo turned to leave, she added, the Southern Revolution begins in 1 month. If you want to know more about your past, and help shape the world's future, find us in Baltigo after it starts. The invitation hung in the air between them, an open door to a different path than the one he'd been following with his brothers. For the first time since they'd set sail together, Sabo felt pulled in a direction that might not include Luffy and Ace. I'll think about it, he promised, then hurried out to find his brothers. As agreed, the 3 brothers converged at the harbor cafe as afternoon faded toward evening. One look at each other's expressions told them all they needed to know, each had discovered troubling information. Admiral, Ace said without preamble, keeping his voice low despite the bustling cafe around them. I know, Luffy nodded. Akiji. I saw him talking to Rayler. He's hunting us specifically, Sabo added, quickly explaining what he'd learned from Koala. They compared notes rapidly, Luffy's discovery about road poneglyphs and the will of D, Ace's encounter with the Whitebeard commanders, and Sabo's revelations about his past. We need to leave Crossroads immediately, Ace concluded. The Mary's not ready, Sabo countered. Nami and the others are still gathering supplies. We'd be setting out unprepared. Better unprepared than captured by an admiral, Ace argued. Luffy, who had been uncharacteristically thoughtful during their exchange, suddenly stood up. Let's fight him. His brothers stared at him in disbelief. Have you lost your mind? Ace hissed. He's an admiral, Luffy. One of the Marine's ultimate fighters. So? Luffy shrugged. We're strong too. And there's 3 of us. This isn't some East Blue captain or bounty hunter, Sabo tried to reason. Admirals are on another level entirely. We won't know unless we try, Luffy insisted stubbornly. Besides, we need time for everyone to get back to the ship and prepare to leave. If we avoid him, he'll just come after the Mary. Ace and Sabo exchanged glances, recognizing the twisted logic in Luffy's argument. As reckless as confronting an admiral seemed, letting him target their ship with their unprepared crewmates aboard would be worse. If, and this is a big if, we decided to confront him, Sabo said slowly, we'd need a plan. And an exit strategy. And a location away from civilians, Ace added, reluctantly engaging with the idea. Luffy grinned, recognizing he'd won them over. I know just the place. Rayler told me about an abandoned mining platform off the West Harbor. No one goes there anymore. Perfect, Sabo nodded. I'll send word to the others to prepare the Mary for immediate departure and meet us there. How do we get Akiji to meet us there instead of hunting the ship? Ace questioned. Luffy's grin widened. Easy. We tell him. Before his brothers could stop him, Luffy climbed onto their table and cupped his hands around his mouth. Hey! Anyone who knows Admiral Akiji. Tell him the 3 captains want to meet him at the old mining platform. 1 hour. The cafe went silent, patrons staring in shock at the bold announcement. Are you insane? Ace yanked him down. Trust me, Luffy said confidently. He'll come. And we'll be ready. The abandoned mining platform stretched over the water like a skeletal hand, a central hub with 5 extending piers, weathered and rusting but still structurally sound. The 3 brothers arrived early, using the time to familiarize themselves with the layout and plan their strategy. Remember, Sabo cautioned as they prepared, we're not trying to defeat him. Just hold him off long enough for the others to ready the Mary, then escape. Speak for yourself, Luffy replied. I'm gonna kick he's here, Ace interrupted, pointing to a figure walking calmly along the causeway connecting the platform to the shore. Admiral Akiji, no longer maintaining his Kuzan disguise, approached with the unhurried gait of a man without concerns. His marine coat hung from his shoulders despite the supposed covert nature of his presence in Crossroads, and his relaxed posture belied the immense power they knew he possessed. 3 captains pirates, he called as he reached the central platform. I'm actually impressed. Most rookies would be halfway to the next island by now. We're not most rookies, Ace replied, flames already dancing around his fists. Clearly. Akiji's gaze swept over them assessingly. Fire Fist Ace, son of Gold Roger. Monkey D, Luffy, grandson of Garp. And Sabo, born noble but raised wild. Fascinating combination. Why are you after us? Sabo demanded. We haven't directly challenged the world government. Yet, Akiji corrected. But your trajectory is clear. Rising bounties, growing crew, advancing rapidly through the Grand Line. Your bloodline, Ace. Your initial, Luffy. Your revolutionary connections, Sabo. Individually concerning, collectively a problem. So you decided to hunt us down? Ace challenged. I was ordered to assess and contain, Akiji clarified. The world government is particularly sensitive about potential disruptions right now. The summit, Sabo nodded in understanding. Precisely. Akiji sighed heavily, as if the entire situation was troublesome. Personally, I prefer to let you develop further before making a judgment. But orders are orders. What if we promise not to disrupt your summit thing? Luffy suggested. Akiji actually chuckled. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way, Straw Hat. The 3 of you together represent too much potential danger. His expression hardened. I'll make this simple, surrender now, and I'll ensure you're treated well. Resist, and I'll have no choice but to use lethal force. The brothers' response came in the form of simultaneous attack, Ace launching a fire fist, Sabo charging with his pipe infused with trap power to disrupt Akiji's abilities, and Luffy stretching his arm for a long-distance punch. Akiji didn't move until the last possible moment. Then, with casual grace, he transformed into ice, allowing Ace's fire and Luffy's punch to pass through him harmlessly while catching Sabo's pipe in a suddenly solidified hand. Ice Age, he said quietly. The temperature plummeted instantly. Ice spread from his body across the platform, crackling as it advanced with frightening speed. The brothers leapt backward, but not before the ice caught Sabo's arm through his grip on the pipe, freezing it solid to the elbow. Sabo! Luffy cried in alarm. The strategist brother smashed his frozen arm against a metal railing, shattering the ice but leaving the limb dangling uselessly at his side. I warned you, Akiji said, still eerily calm. I don't enjoy hurting young pirates with potential, but I will complete my mission. Ace responded with an intense heat wave, flames erupting around him in a defensive perimeter that melted the encroaching ice. Stay behind me, he called to his brothers. That won't save you, Akiji noted. With blinding speed, he reformed behind them, hands outstretched. Ice time. Only Luffy's incredible reflexes saved them, his rubber arm stretching to grab both brothers and yank them aside as a blast of freezing air passed through where they'd been standing. The metal walkway they'd occupied froze instantly, becoming so brittle it cracked under its own weight. He's fast, Ace gasped, maintaining his flame shield with visible effort. And his range is incredible. We need to separate him from his ice, Sabo suggested through gritted teeth, cradling his damaged arm. How? Luffy demanded, narrowly dodging another ice projectile. The water, Sabo nodded toward the sea below the platform. If we can get him to fall in. He'll just freeze it and walk back up, Ace pointed out. Not if we keep him occupied, Sabo countered. Luffy, can you? His strategy session was interrupted by a massive ice spear that shattered the walkway beneath them. The brothers fell in different directions, scattered across the platform's remaining intact sections. Akiji didn't hesitate, targeting the wounded Sabo first. He appeared before the strategic brother, hand already reaching for his chest in what would clearly be a lethal freezing attack. Gum Gum Rocket. Luffy launched himself across the gap, colliding with Akiji and disrupting his attack on Sabo. The Admiral staggered back but quickly recovered, encasing Luffy's extended arm in ice. Predictable, Akiji commented, tightening his frozen grip on Luffy's arm. So is this. Ace called, having used the distraction to position himself. Fire Pillar. A column of intense flame erupted beneath Akiji, forcing him to release Luffy and leap aside. The ice encasing Luffy's arm melted in the heat wave, though steam rose from his reddened skin. You three work well together, Akiji acknowledged, reforming atop a nearby crane. But you're outmatched. Ice Block, Partisan. Multiple ice spears formed in the air around him, launching toward the brothers from different angles. Ace melted those he could, Luffy dodged with rubber contortions, and Sabo, despite his injured arm, managed to use his trap powers to detect weaknesses in the ice structures and shatter them with precisely aimed kicks. The battle continued across the deteriorating platform, a deadly dance of fire, ice, rubber, and tactical ingenuity. The brothers landed occasional blows, but Akiji's Logia abilities made substantial damage nearly impossible. Physical attacks passed through him, and even Ace's flames only temporarily disrupted his ice form. We can't beat him conventionally, Sabo called during a momentary respite. The brothers regrouped behind a large storage container. We don't need to beat him, Ace reminded, breathing heavily from continuous flame production. Just delay him until the Mary's ready. How long has it been? Luffy asked, unnaturally serious as blood trickled from a cut where an ice shard had caught his cheek. About 30 minutes, Sabo estimated. We need at least another 15. Then let's give them 15 minutes, Luffy decided, his expression hardening with determination. I've got an idea, but I need you guys to keep him busy for a minute. Before they could ask details, he stretched his arms to grab a distant piece of the platform and catapulted away. Ace and Sabo exchanged brief glances, then nodded in unspoken agreement. Whatever Luffy planned, they would buy him time. They emerged from cover simultaneously, attacking from different directions. Ace sent waves of fire to corral Akiji's movements while Sabo, despite his injured arm, used his pipe to strike at the platform's structural supports, creating obstacles and hazards that even a Logia user would need to navigate. Your coordination is impressive, Akiji commented, easily avoiding their attacks but unable to immediately counter due to the environmental challenges Sabo created. Most pirate crews lack this level of synchronization. We're not most crews, Ace replied, maintaining constant flame pressure to keep Akiji from freezing the entire area. Brothers rather than just crewmates, Akiji nodded thoughtfully. That explains it. Still, brotherhood won't save you from, hey ice guy. Luffy's voice interrupted from above. Catch! All three combatants looked up to see Luffy perched atop the platform's highest point, a crane arm extending over the water. In his hands was a massive metal container, clearly weighing hundreds of pounds, yet he held it overhead as if it were nothing. Gum Gum Giant Hammer! Luffy shouted, using his rubber powers to accelerate the container downward with incredible force. Akiji's eyes widened in genuine surprise. The container was too large to dodge easily, and its trajectory would impact the section of platform where he stood, potentially collapsing the entire structure. He raised his hands. Ice Block, Fire Fist, Inferno. Ace interrupted, unleashing his most powerful attack directly at Akiji's position. The intense heat disrupted the Admiral's ice formation, forcing him to solidify and leap aside, directly into Sabo's calculated position. Trap spring. Sabo called, having used his devil fruit powers to convert a section of the platform into a makeshift catapult. The metal beneath Akiji's feet suddenly bent and released, launching the Admiral upward, directly into the path of Luffy's falling container. The impact was tremendous. The container struck Akiji mid-air, carrying him downward through the weakened platform. Metal shrieked and tore as an entire section collapsed, plunging into the sea below in an explosion of debris and spray. Luffy landed beside his brothers, all three watching the water for signs of the Admiral. "Did we get him?" Luffy asked hopefully. His answer came as the sea around the platform began to freeze, ice spreading with unnatural speed from the impact point. Within seconds, a massive ice field extended in all directions. From the center emerged Akiji, his casual demeanor finally replaced with serious focus. His marine coat was gone, and for the first time, he showed signs of exertion. "Impressive," he acknowledged, ice reforming around his body. "Few pirates have ever managed to land a significant hit on me. But playtime is over." "So is stalling time," Sabo murmured to his brothers, spotting a signal flare rising from the harbor. The Mary was ready. Akiji raised both arms, the temperature dropping precipitously. Ice Age, complete glaciation. The brothers realized the danger too late. Ice exploded upward from the frozen sea, encasing the remaining platform and reaching for them with crystalline fingers. Unlike his previous attacks, this technique left no room for evasion. It was a total freezing of everything within range. Ace unleashed his most powerful fire shield, creating a dome of flames around them, but even his Logia powers struggled against the overwhelming cold. The flames hissed and diminished as ice pressed inward from all directions. "I can't hold it," Ace shouted, pouring every ounce of his power into maintaining the shield. "We need to reach the water," Sabo called, pointing to a gap in the ice field where their signal flare had melted a thin section. "If we can get to that opening, I've got this," Luffy declared, winding up his body like a spring. Gum gum. Tornado Cannon. Combining his earlier tornado technique with his powerful bazooka, Luffy unleashed a spinning, drilling attack that punched through Akiji's encroaching ice wall. The opening was small but sufficient, if they moved immediately. "Go!" Ace commanded, his fire shield collapsing as exhaustion claimed him. Luffy grabbed both brothers, stretching his free arm toward a distant floating debris piece. "Hang on." They launched through the opening moments before the ice closed completely behind them. Akiji's attack continued, the entire platform vanishing beneath a mountain of ice that rose like a frozen monument from the sea. The brothers crashed into the water beyond the ice field, Luffy and Ace immediately weakening due to their devil fruit vulnerabilities. Sabo, despite his injured arm, managed to keep them afloat long enough for a small boat to reach them. Zoro and Usopp, sent from the Mary for extraction. "That was cutting it close," Zoro commented as they hauled the exhausted brothers aboard. "Did you see that mountain of ice?" Usopp exclaimed, rowing frantically. "What kind of monster were you fighting?" "Admiral," Ace managed between labored breaths. "Marine Admiral Akiji." Zoro's expression darkened. "Then we need to move quickly. Even an admiral won't be stopped by ice of his own making for long." They rendezvoused with the Mary at the harbor mouth, where Nami had already plotted their escape route. As they transferred to the larger vessel, they caught sight of Akiji standing atop his ice mountain, watching their departure without immediate pursuit. "Why isn't he following?" Chopper asked nervously as he treated Sabo's damaged arm and the brothers' various injuries. "Crossroads neutrality," Sabo explained, wincing as the doctor applied medication. "He violated it by attacking us, but actively pursuing us from Crossroads waters would be an even more blatant breach. He's probably calculating whether it's worth the diplomatic incident. So we have a head start," Nami concluded, already adjusting their course to utilize favorable currents. "But where are we heading?" The three brothers exchanged looks, a silent conversation passing between them. For the first time since they'd begun their journey, no immediate consensus emerged. Each had discovered paths that potentially led away from their shared adventure. "We should discuss that," Ace finally said. "Below deck." As brothers. The crew recognized the seriousness of the moment and gave them space. In the Mary's small cabin, the three sat facing each other, their recent battle wounds still fresh, but the invisible tensions between them feeling somehow more significant. "We each found something at crossroads," Sabo began diplomatically. "Something that might change our journey's direction." "Road poneglyphs," Luffy nodded. "I need to find them to reach Laugh Tale." "Whitebeard," Ace acknowledged. "And answers about Roger I've spent my life avoiding." "The Revolutionary Army," Sabo completed. "And apparently, my forgotten past." The silence that followed felt heavier than any they'd shared before. For years, they'd been inseparable, brothers by choice who'd sworn to always support each other. But now, the Grand Line had shown them paths that might require separation. "So what do we do?" Luffy asked, uncharacteristically subdued. Ace sighed deeply. "When we started this journey, we knew our dreams might eventually take us in different directions. We just didn't expect it to happen so soon." "It hasn't happened yet," Sabo pointed out. "We're still discussing options." "But you're thinking about joining the revolutionaries," Ace challenged gently. "Aren't you?" Sabo couldn't deny it. "The opportunity to fight directly against the world's corruption, it calls to me. And discovering I might have a history with them, a purpose Dragon himself recognized." "And you want to meet Whitebeard," Luffy said to Ace, not accusingly but matter-of-factly. Ace nodded slowly. "The Whitebeard pirates offered protection, information about Roger, and something else, a family that understands what it means to choose your bonds rather than be born to them." "Like us," Luffy noted. "Like us," Ace agreed. "But also different. A larger family, with the strength to stand against the world government in ways we can't yet." Luffy looked between his brothers, his usually carefree expression replaced by thoughtful understanding. "I've always wanted to be Pirate King. That hasn't changed. But now I know more about what it means, finding the road poneglyphs, understanding the will of D, discovering what made Roger laugh at Laugh Tale." He adjusted his straw hat. "And I think that's a journey I need to make as a captain, not just one of three captains." The truth hung between them, their paths were diverging, perhaps temporarily, perhaps permanently. The shared journey they'd begun might be approaching a fork none had anticipated reaching so soon. "So this is it?" Ace asked quietly. "The three captains' pirates dissolve already?" "Not dissolve," Sabo corrected firmly. "Transform. We'll always be brothers, always support each other's dreams. But maybe those dreams require different vessels for a while. We'd need to divide the crew," Ace realized. "They didn't sign up for this kind of change." "We asked them," Luffy stated simply. "Give them the choice, like we have." They emerged from the cabin to find the crew waiting anxiously on deck. Night had fallen, and the Mary sailed swiftly through calm seas, putting distance between them and crossroads with each passing moment. "We have a decision to make," Sabo announced. "All of us." They explained the situation, the opportunities each brother had discovered, the paths that called to them individually, the possibility of separating to pursue these different routes. The crew listened in stunned silence. "So you're breaking up the crew?" Nami finally asked, her practical nature seeking clarity. "We're considering pursuing our dreams along different paths," Ace clarified. "At least for a time. And we want to know where each of you would choose to go, if we take this course." "I stay with Luffy," Zoro said immediately, his loyalty to his original captain unquestioned. "I pledged to help him become king of the pirates, and that hasn't changed." One by one, the crew members voiced their preferences. Nami and Usopp, who had joined specifically through Luffy's recruitment, similarly chose to remain with the rubber captain. Chopper, still new to the crew, hesitantly opted to join Ace, drawn to his protective nature and leadership style. By dawn, the broad strokes of their new arrangements had formed. Luffy would take the Merry with Zoro, Nami, and Usopp, continuing his quest for the road poneglyphs and ultimately the One Piece. Ace would seek out the Whitebeard pirates with Chopper, pursuing answers about Roger and potentially the protection of Whitebeard's flag. Sabo would connect with the revolutionaries to explore his past and their fight against world corruption. "We need a rendezvous point," Ace said as they finalized plans. "Somewhere we can meet again, compare notes, perhaps rejoin if our paths converge." "Water 7, Nami suggested, consulting her maps. "It's a major shipbuilding island about 6 months' journey from here. Neutral territory, well connected to news from all parts of the Grand Line." "Water 7 in 6 months, Sabo agreed. "Whether we've accomplished our individual goals or not, we meet there and decide what comes next." As the sun rose on a new day, the Going Merry approached a small, uninhabited island where they would make their final preparations before separating. Sabo used his trap powers to convert salvaged materials into 2 serviceable small boats, one for himself, one for Ace and Chopper. They divided their supplies, weapons, and the navigational aids from Heath equitably. Their last evening together was spent around a campfire on the beach, sharing stories of their journey so far and speculating about the adventures ahead. Despite the impending separation, the mood remained positive. They weren't ending their brotherhood, merely expanding its reach across the Grand Line. Morning arrived with clear skies and favorable winds. The 3 brothers stood at the shore, their new vessels ready, their paths chosen. 6 months, Ace reiterated, clasping forearms with his brothers in turn. "Water 7. Don't be late. Try not to start a war with the world government before then," Sabo replied with a wry smile. "No promises," Luffy grinned, adjusting his straw hat. "I'm still gonna be king of the pirates. And I'll still be there to see it," Ace promised. "Just taking a detour." "We all are," Sabo nodded. "Detours that might make us stronger when we reunite." They embraced one final time, Luffy's rubber arms wrapping around both brothers, Ace's warmth enveloping them, Sabo's steadfast strength binding them together despite the imminent separation. Then, without prolonging the farewell, they boarded their respective vessels. Luffy back to the Merry with his original crew, Ace and Chopper to their small but sturdy craft, and Sabo alone to the boat that would carry him to revolutionary contacts. 3 ships, 3 directions, 3 dreams, but one brotherhood that transcended distance and time. As they sailed away from each other, none looked back. Their eyes remained fixed on the horizons before them, each pursuing the paths that called to their hearts, carrying with them the strength and love of their brothers. The 3 captains' pirates hadn't ended. They had evolved, spreading their influence across the Grand Line in ways that might ultimately change the world far more profoundly than if they'd remained together. And in 6 months, at Water 7, their saga would enter its next chapter, perhaps reunited, perhaps continuing on separate courses, but forever connected by bonds stronger than blood, forged in childhood and tempered by adventure. The Grand Line awaited, with all its dangers and marvels. 3 brothers sailed to meet it, carrying each other in their hearts even as the distance between their vessels grew. 3 captains. 3 ships. 3 dreams. 1 unbreakable brotherhood. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.